Come and discover the epic wonders, the friendly faces, and incredible new adventures that will change you and the way you see the world. Right here in Queensland.
Hello and welcome to AusCycling's coverage of the National Track Cycling Championships. We're here at the Meares Velodrome in Brisbane. Conditions are ideal. And Kate Bates, tonight we've got the women's points race. And you're a former world champion of that. You must be excited.
I am. I mean, my eyes light up. It's such an exciting race, Scott. And I think that we've got a great field out there tonight. 25 kilometres. It'll be action-packed. I just love, there is a special part about the points race. For you, we had a Madison last night. And you got to, you know, give a little bit of advice to the younger riders. So I think we'll have a bit of a show tonight. It
is, and the points race is the most difficult race on the Velodrome, so stick around to make sure you watch that. It's very, very difficult indeed. Also, the men's Omnium for the elite riders, the endurance riders, that's coming to a conclusion with their elimination and their points race as well. So another couple of tough races there. Yeah,
they're two very taxing events, and I think the elimination especially can be quite exciting. And the points race, so much depends on what has unfolded in those earlier rounds. So I think that we've got a lot of exciting action happening tonight, and for commentators, I mean, it's kind of our best wish, right?
It is. And for the sprinters, the men's sprinters are coming out for the team sprint as well. So we'll get to see the biggest, the fastest, the most powerful cyclists in Australia, because that's what they are in the team sprint. That'll be good.
It'll be unreal. Good to see the Olympic-ready guys out on track. They've been out for demonstration events, but tonight it's for green and gold, so a little bit different.
Well, just before the start, we did catch up with one of those fast sprinters, and he's the current Australian sprint champion, Matthew Richardson. Only big night for you, the team sprints. Always an interesting one, considering you're on target for the Tokyo Olympic Games, and this is a big key for Australia, this particular event.
Yeah, absolutely. The last couple of years have been really good for us as a team. We've really started to click as a team. COVID last year hit, and we kind of bunkered down and got into some good training, and yeah, we came out really well this year.
You are also looking to defend your sprint title. That's in the next couple of days. How hard is it to focus on things like that, national titles in those events, when Tokyo is really the big goal and you have to train through all of these events like this?
Yeah, that's it. You kind of take these events as big learning experiences, I think. You can learn a lot from racing under fatigue. It forces you to do different things, and you really have to think kind of outside the box as the legs aren't there. So yeah, we really just use it as learning.
What about the competition? So Matthew Glaetzer, one of your training partners and teammates for the Olympics, but racing against him this time, you want to get the better of him, don't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. You know, we're all very competitive people. It's friendly competition, and it really helps us kind of build each other up and make each other better.
And finally, conditions of the Velodrome here. We know it's fast. Commonwealth Games was really quick. What's it like now here for the track nats?
Yeah, really good. Brisbane's always fast. It's always got that high humidity, high temperature. So yeah, it's always good racing here at Nationals, and always good conditions.
Good luck tonight and for the next couple of days. Really looking forward to watching your race.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Looking forward to seeing Matthew Richardson, not just tonight in the team sprint, but in the elite sprint, and Kieran, defending champion in the elite men's sprint. This is the first race of the night. It's the elite men's Omnium elimination, so the third discipline in the 4 rounds of the Omnium. And the elimination, Kate Bates, is always a really interesting race to watch. I'm not sure if it's an interesting one to ride, unless you're absolutely one of the best, because it's pretty tough. Last rider across the line every couple of laps is eliminated until we have 2 riders left, and then they'll sprint for the win at the end. So it's about focusing on the back of the bunch rather than the front. But keeping an eye on the front, because the guys on the front are wasting a lot of energy to try and stay up there. That's what could come back to bite them later in the race.
It is always a bit of a curious race, but I had a bit of a giggle because I just think it's one of the coolest events we have.
Were you good at it, were you?
Yes. I cannot believe it's actually a legitimate race now, because when I grew up racing, it was definitely carnivals only. And so it's kind of a bit of a trick you pulled out of the bag at some point. But it is a pretty brutal race. A lot of the riders, I think, go in thinking if you just stay up the front, you're fine. But it very quickly gets whittled down until there's only a few, and being at the front is no longer enough. So you actually also have to really pay attention to how many laps you're doing, to counting that, and to how many riders are in. We will notice a little bit of collusion happening between the states here. That is normal. They do have to be careful about how obviously they do that, but we can expect the light-coloured jerseys to work together a little bit here. A little bit of danger at the back for the New South Welshman, but he is hustling up around the top. But this is a tough way to do it, Scott. If every time you have to take the high, long road, it uses a lot of energy. Looks like the Queenslander 103, James Moriarty. That is a bit of a surprise.
It is. He's a strong rider. Now, the rider from New South Wales you were talking about that was going very high around the top, he stayed in, but that's Kurt Ether. And he was one of the pre-race favourites for this particular event, the Omnium. So he's still at the back again now, or it's changed now. But Kurt Ether was in a bit of danger there. Now, in the overall standings, because we have had the scratch race and the tempo race already this afternoon, this is the third, as I said, discipline within the Omnium series. 4 races. Jensen Plowright leads the way, and he's up there with Liam Walsh. So Plowright and Walsh both on 76 points. So they're tied in first place, those two riders. Ryan Schilt is in third place on 66, so 10 points difference between them. And the further you go in this race, the more points you gather, which will be very helpful when you go into the final discipline, which is the points race. And Ryan Schilt's in the orange colours, third place overall. He was down towards the back, now in last position, as we saw the Queensland rider last across the line eliminated.
Well, now, curiously, Kurt Ether, who is out on track, is not actually on the Omnium points list at the moment, nor is he actually on the start list. So, yes, well, that might have changed a little bit. It looks like on your start list there, he's actually up on 50 points. So maybe a little bit of a revision there. So we'll have to... hopefully he didn't see that. He would have been a bit nervous standing on the top of the track. And he's out now. So sorry. Oh, I hope I didn't put the hex on him. It looks like he might have been eliminated there.
No, I think they've gone down for the Queenslander on the inside. So Kurt is really... Like, it's always, when you talk about the carnival racing, so back in the day, you know, racing around the carnivals, non-championships events, the elimination was always fun, and the crowd really loved the riders doing what Ether is doing now, at the back, and just snipering, you know, just being the assassinating the riders at the back of the group and just pipping them and staying in the race.
I feel like all you do is assassinate yourself.
It's tough
it's a
to do
pretty
this.
tough way to do it, and he is out now, so...
Yeah.
It hasn't worked for him. I must say the body language didn't indicate a whole lot of motivation there, so he might just be hanging on to that points race, or perhaps to be a bit of a worker bee for the other New South Wales riders in that finale.
Big move right around the outside in the light blue colours of New South Wales. So Liam Walsh rides for Queensland, Jensen Plowright for Victoria. They are the two riders that are still in the race, both tied on in equal first. 114, it was Henry Dietz that goes out. We saw Henry a little bit yesterday in the coverage when we were focusing on some of the Victorian riders in the crowd, sporting a wonderful hairstyle. He's now out of the elimination, unfortunately, Henry. So the top 3 riders are still there. Ryan Schilt in the orange colours. Now, he is from Victoria, but he now rides for the Netherlands, rides for the Olympia Amsterdam club, and he dives down underneath, which is often dangerous. And in this case, it certainly is. So Ryan Schilt, third in the overall standings, is now eliminated. So this is going to be a problem for him to try and hold on to that high placing as we go into the points race after this. Oh no, they have allowed him in. So there's a rider at the front. What had happened there? So a little bit of confusion there, because as they came through, definitely the orange jersey was the last rider across the line. But Henry Dietz had stayed in for that next elimination. So the last rider, who was Schilt, that was neutralised for that particular elimination until they got Henry out of the race. Then they keep going.
It isn't as straightforward as it might seem when you say, well, last over the line is out, and that's that. That's the number of laps. Sometimes there is a little bit more nuance to it, but what doesn't change is this battle at the back, and you can really get caught out down the bottom now. That was Bill Simpson out. He was an exceptional junior, He's stepped up into the ranks and been quite successful, but it is definitely a step up in level, Scott, and this elimination, it's a long day out on the track, and it can certainly bite at this point in the race.
So down the back straight, you can see rider 119, Graham Frisley. He's in the danger zone now. And he is the next rider to go out. So Jensen Plowright is still there. So this is a really good opportunity for him to maximise his points. I actually did bump into Jensen just before we came up to the commentary position, and he said this is the event that he's hoping to gain some extra points to have a buffer to go into that final points race. But at the moment, his next two opponents in Walsh and Schilt are also there, and there they go, right round the outside. So that's Ryan Schilt in the orange colours. Liam Walsh in the maroon of Queensland, looking over his shoulder. And then a real sprint to the line. That was very tight. 4 riders across the line. Blake Agnoletto. So 117 in the middle. He'd be disappointed with that. He thought he might have been done enough just to get through. But when Ryan Schilt and Liam Walsh went round the outside, they then stalled. Balked on the front, stacked everybody up a little bit behind, and then 4 riders across the track.
This is really the business end of the race now. It'll be, we see already much harsher accelerations and pushing all the way to the line. There's not really anybody who can just roll it in at this point. But doesn't that just go to show the danger point that happens there? Rowan Hayden-Smith is the New South Wales rider eliminated. The danger point at the bottom of the track, Scott, sometimes you are so busy looking at the riders coming 3 or 4 wide that you think, oh dear, but often that final straight, they can gain a little bit of speed, and it can be some of the riders that get trapped out early. It looks like Liam Walsh is in trouble, so this is a bit of a good favour for Jensen Plowright if he can't move up here.
So Walsh trying to come over Schilt. He does get over the top, and it's Ryan Schilt in the orange colours that will be the rider eliminated. So that was 3rd place overall in the standings after the first 2 events, the scratch race and the tempo event. So good points though. So he's still keeping himself well in the mix by finishing in the top 4. We now have Jensen Plowright, who goes early, going into 2nd position. Now back into 3rd. That's Josh Duffy from Tasmania. So Duffy's starting to hurt a little bit. You can see the body language. He wasn't very quick to jump after the attack of Plowright. So Josh Duffy will be the next to go. Plowright has a big buffer though, also on Liam Walsh. And with a gap like that, you might as well keep going if you can, and that's what he's going to do. So they'll come around to get the final bell, the final elimination, but you can see that's already taken place with the big attack from Jensen Plowright. That put Walsh under a lot of pressure. It took Duffy out of the race, and Walsh will come around to finish 2nd. So Jensen Plowright will get only a couple of points advantage now to go into the final event, the points race, over Liam Walsh. So 1st and 2nd in the overall standings, 1st and 2nd going into the final race as well, and Josh Duffy putting a good performance to finish 3rd in this one.
There are so many points on offer in the points race though that the riders not only need to watch their points and their standings heading into the finish, but they also really need to taper their energy levels. So that was probably quite a smart move by Liam Walsh to not burn every match he had in the box in order to possibly catch up. There's a bit of tactics involved in that, and that takes a lot of control. And I think it's really worth noting, Scott, that a lot of the younger riders in particular, that is sometimes where they lose out, is that element of control and maturity in their racing and knowing when to control it and when not to.
So this is just some highlights of the event. We saw Ryan Schilt just diving down underneath. He stayed in that time onto the front as we got closer, and look at that. That was the one where Blake Agnoletto went out. We had a shout out to Blake's father last night, and I'll say it again because he is in hospital in Melbourne after being hit by a truck, I think it was, in Bendigo. So
Heavens.
Pretty nasty accident. So shout out to Sandy. All the best to him. But Jensen Plowright is the winner of the 3rd discipline in the Elite Men's Omnium. It was the elimination race. That was 2nd place there, Liam Walsh. So a good battle to come into this final points race. The points differences will be so small that really it doesn't matter too much. It's going to be like a straight out points race. What happens is It's a bit different to a normal points where everybody starts on 0 points. Plowright will be really looking at Walsh, Schilt, Bledden, the riders that are just behind in the overall classification. That allows riders in the Omnium that come into the final event in 6th, 7th, 8th place to really get some leeway. They might be able to take laps on the field and gain a lot of points and bring themselves right back up in the overall standings.
Oh, I think it's going to be a horrible race. And by horrible, I mean terribly entertaining for us, but
Very
a little
hard.
bit scarring, possibly for the riders. I was at a lunch today, and Henk Vogel's, one of our tough men of Australian cycling in the past, was describing what he said was his favourite race, Paris-Roubaix, of course. But the words he used, I tell you, they weren't very romantic, and they did not make it sound like a particularly nice event at all. You know, such harsh words about suffering and just the cobbles and the rattling of the bike. But I think that sometimes that is absolutely the beauty of the sport, is that they are warriors. These are really tough events. They make it look easy, but by all means, it is not. A few pies being consumed in the crowd there, Scott. Send us one up, fellas.
Where we're on to the men's team sprint qualifying, and the first 2 teams will be mixed teams. So this one, you can see 2 riders from Victoria and 1 from Queensland. Now that's Brian Davies of Queensland riding with Sam Gallagher and Ned Pollard. The next team to come is an international lineup of combined riders, and these first 2 teams that ride cannot then go for the medals. So they'll be racing each other for 5th and 6th, but they give themselves a trial. Ooh, almost a false start.
Was a false start.
Yeah, we saw Byron Davies, just going a little bit early. Back in the day, there would have been a disqualification, but they will get another go.
A few nerves can lead to false starts because, and I mean, that's the other thing to look at in this combination, Scott, is it is a mixed team, exactly as you were talking about. They don't know each other too well. They wouldn't have necessarily ridden together that well.
Toasted sandwich I see there.
Oh,
yeah,
it looks like an egg and bacon roll maybe. Some chippies.
Chips, yeah.
Are they just taunting us, do you think?
Yeah, no pies in this particular part of the grandstand, though.
No,
so
they're gone. They're the first to go.
Yeah, this section's not in favour of the old Aussie meat pie. Or maybe they're onto their second course. Pie was the entree. So the team sprint, 3 laps of the track, which is also the case now for the women. It was only 2 for them, 2 riders per team. Now it's 3 for both the elite women and the elite men, which is great. Didn't make much sense why we didn't do that in the past. But 3 laps of the track. First rider does the first lap, second rider does the second, and the third rider has to go the long way, do all for 3 laps.
Well, I rode a team sprint once upon a time, but I had to ride with Christine Bailey, whose brother Ryan, of course, won 2 Olympic gold medals in 2004. Suffice it to say that at the end of the day, Christine said, thank you for joining me out on track, but perhaps not again.
Only rider to get lapped by their own teammate in the team sprint.
It was at a World Cup as well. It was an experiment, let's call it that.
Ned Pollard it's in the starting gate. Sam Gallagher beside him, the 2 Victorians, and Byron Davies at the top. He won't want a false start this time because he'll be going back into the infield.
Yeah, they do get 1 restart, but if the same rider does that twice, unfortunately, they're not allowed to continue. So a little bit more control needed here.
And Pollard bouncing out at the start gate now. It's very important for these riders, even though they won't be racing for the medals because it's a mixed team, still to post good times. The national coaches, selectors, they are here at the national championships, as you would imagine, and they're looking at all of the next riders coming through to fill those spots that may come up after the Tokyo Olympics. Pollard goes through, does the first lap. Now it's Sam Gallagher coming through, and Byron Davies very tight on the wheel. He looks very comfortable, the Queenslander, actually. Very big in stature compared to the 2 Victorians. And now 1 lap to go for Davies. This will be the time to beat, obviously. And it'll be interesting to see just how fast they are against some of the state teams as we get further down. The South Australians will be the last team to go. And 45.3 seconds is the time. 45.3 seconds. Now, the national team did a trial the other day, and they were down in the low 42s, I think it was. Incredibly fast, the national team, so just to gauge.
If at that time at 45.3, that is an average, remembering from a standing start, not a flying start, of 59.6 kilometres per hour. So when the national team's knocking another 3 seconds off that again, it is phenomenal how fast they're going. And it takes about half a lap, Scott, half a lap to accelerate up to full speed.
About three for me.
Yeah, I just never get there, actually, given my endurance legs. And so that just, again, shows the speeds that they get to in that following 2.5 laps. Sometimes it can be quite alarming. We saw it there with Byron Davis, where they go off the start line and you think that that third rider has been gapped. Usually the third rider isn't quite as explosive in that first half lap, but as long as they remain within the slipstream, then they can ensure that when they come through on that third lap, they do so with a fair bit of speed.
Interesting combination. I said that we had an international combined team as our second team, not allowed to race for the medals in the national championships here, but we have Shane Perkins, who is from Melbourne, but rides now for Russia and former representative for Australia, World Keirin champion back in the day, an Olympian as well, Commonwealth Games also, but now made the move across to Russia, riding alongside two of the riders from Malaysia, also a former Keirin World Champion in Azizul Awang, is in second position, and also Shah at the top of the track. So two accomplished Malaysians, two former World Keirin champions, and Shane Perkins gets them away. Now, he has been training very hard for this particular discipline for Russia, to be the starter in the team sprint at the Olympic Games. And look at the gap that he's opened up. It's not unusual to see a gap at the start. The riders in second and third position like to get a run at the rider in front of them to really be slung out onto their own particular lap, but that was an incredibly fast lap from Shane Perkins. It'll be good to see how that matches up against the elite Australian riders later on. Awang now out of the way, and Shah to finish off the lap.
So 45.3 is the time that was set by the combined state of the Queenslanders and Victorians. I think they will go better on the back of these Malaysian riders all the way to the line for Shah, and 44.854, averaging over 60 kilometres an hour for that combination. I think if they had a bit more time to work together, they could shave quite a lot off that, because individually, all three of them are pretty well credentialed.
Very good start from Shane Perkins, and as I mentioned, it'll be interesting to see just how he compares for his standing lap to the riders later on, particularly the riders that are part of our national program. And in terms of the Tokyo Olympic Games, you know, it's interesting for me in particular, commentating that in a couple of months, to see just how Shane Perkins is travelling, because this is something new for him. He's been in the team sprint for Australia before, but never first position. He was never the quickest from the start. He has had to completely modify his training over the last couple of years to play this role now for Russia. Former Keirin World Champ, great from a flying start, from a standing start. It's a different skill set, and that's something Shane has worked very, very well at improving over the last couple of years. Western Australia now, the next team to come up. So this is the first of our teams that will be racing to get themselves in contention to race for gold. And we'll see how Kai Bosner, Matthew Richardson and Luke Zachariah go. Matty Richardson, we saw him before the start. The interview we had just before the racing got underway. Well-spoken young man and incredibly fast. He is super, super quick from a standing start. He is the starter for Australia. Will be guiding our team into the team sprint at the Tokyo Olympic Games. And when he comes back and rides with his state team, the question then is, how nervous will they be trying to follow the wheel of someone as fast as Matthew Richardson?
Yeah, it's a little bit intimidating, isn't it? I think it's also an honour, though, to work, and often we'll see them lift to that level.
West Australia get underway, and leading them out on this occasion is Luke Zachariah. So Zachariah to do the first turn, saving Richardson for the next. And it would have been dangerous to have someone like Richardson going from the start, because he is so incredibly rapid. And now it is Matthew Richardson. You can see the gap opening up as well. Doesn't want to go too far ahead of the third rider. Just struggling, Bonza to try and hold on. Richardson now peels up. And now Kai Bonza it is for the West Australian team. He was put deep into the hurt box just by Matthew Richardson's acceleration through the second lap, so he has to really try and hold on to this to keep himself in contention for the overall medals, and a 45.5, so the third fastest time. We'll have to wait and see if that's going to be good enough to get him into the gold-silver, or Western Australia into the gold-silver ride-off. Still 3 teams to go. ACT, New South Wales and South Australia.
Our Olympic team sprint lads are spread across their home states here, so it does dilute it a bit, it changes it a bit.
Makes it interesting, doesn't it?
It does make it interesting. I mean, it's a good point to think about the impact that having someone like Matthew Richardson has on the team. In many ways, it's not as positive as you may think it is, because some of the other riders, they completely have to change the way they ride, and Richardson isn't necessarily even able to use what he does have for fear of actually gapping and putting a bit of time into the other riders. So I think that they rode quite conservatively. I think Richardson really rode within himself to keep that together. So, well, we'll see with these next 3 times. The ACT is up next. They've got Nathan Hart, so they have a similar problem. In fact, you know, across the board, we're going to really have a standout rider in the next couple of teams. So ACT is up first. We've got Jamie Green, Matthew Mooney and Nathan Hart.
And they've put Hart up into 3rd position, so hoping to utilise his speed in that final lap.
Well, it's a good one, because he can then leave it all out there. He doesn't have to worry at all about the effect of his legs on the others. In fact, he can just go flat chat.
Australian Capital Territory underway. Time to beat, not of the 2 composite teams. The time to beat is that of Western Australia, 45.5. These final 4 teams looking to go into the top ranks to race the medals. And Nathan Hart, as I said, will be the 3rd rider that'll try and post the final time. Jamie Green has done his job, leading them out over the first lap. Matthew Mooney now trying to accelerate even more and take Nathan Hart up to a higher speed. And you see Hart fixed on the wheel. That was comfortable for him. They've done so many race trials over the last couple of months preparing for the Tokyo Olympic Games. Very well drilled. And for Nathan Hart, it was comfortable until then. Now it's absolutely full gas as he comes to the line. And a 45.425. So it's faster than Western Australia. Not as fast as that combined international team, though, but faster than Western Australia. So still 2 teams to go. ACT have still a chance to put themselves up into the race for gold and silver.
Well, it does go to show, doesn't it, just how fast that combined international team was, but also how fast the Australian combined team was the other day. The theory that you get the 3 fastest riders and you put them together and, oh my goodness, they'll be the best team sprint is actually a bit inaccurate. You do need to tweak the roles of all of the riders in there. Some people, Alex Bird's probably the best example I can think of, one of our past Australian sprint champions, who's now one of the sprint coaches in the high performance program for the Aussie team. And when he was in the team sprint, he was such a dedicated and good first wheel rider that if they put him in any other position, it kind of took away his superpowers, so to speak. So they do train very specifically for their roles, and it isn't just as easy as let's move it around today and have a bit of a different ride.
This will be an interesting one as well. New South Wales, it's John Trovas that's in the start gate. So Trovas will be getting New South Wales underway, then Charles Hoffman, and then Tom Cornish in 3rd position. Now Cornish broke the Australian Championship record in the 1,000-metre time trial a couple of days ago. So he's super, super fast over a long distance in a sprint and has been training, preparing with the national team. He's kind of the 4th rider of the team sprint in our national program for Tokyo, so still a chance of making the team. Not quite at the moment in the A team, but he's super fast. Trovas to get them underway, then Hoffman and Cornish.
It's 3 laps, 750 metres. We know that Cornish has a full kilometre of full gas in him, so we don't need to worry about him tonight. They're off to a reasonable start. Again, this gap isn't too bad because we want to see the rider be able to really hit that transition at speed.
Hoffman now comes through on the second lap, and you can see, just like we saw in the last race with Nathan Hart, the national team rider in Cornish looking very comfortable in third wheel. He's good at speed, he's up to it now, and he'll even accelerate down the back straight, Tom Cornish. 59.5 seconds he rode in the kilometre time trial on the first day of competition. Super quick time indeed, and as he comes to the line, 44.8, so a new best time.
That's a blistering one, and that is faster than that combined international with Shane Perkins. And so the fastest ride we've seen on the track tonight.
44.8 seconds. So the international combined team were 44.85 and 44.800 for New South Wales. So this mixing up of the national team, Kate, with each of the three members of the national team going into their different states, ACT, New South Wales and South Australia. Western Australia, ACT and South Australia. Yet the fourth rider, which is Tom Cornish, he goes back into New South Wales. They're now leading.
Yes.
So the combinations, it really is very interesting to see how it all lies.
Riddle me that, Scott. It is a bit of a... you can imagine that the coaches have quite an interesting mind map of different combinations, different times. What if we put them there? How would that work? A lot of trials that go on, trialling different positions. It happens the same in teams pursuits as well. Where they do trial different positions and different starters just to see who can do it the fastest and most efficiently. So Matthew Glaetzer is the big name here.
And in the starting block. So also mixing up the positions that he rides in as well. So Matt Glaetzer will get them underway. Lee Hoffman in second position and Carlos Carismo in the top position. So Matthew Glaetzer, super fast rider, had that nasty health scare a couple of years ago and still coming back to top form, hoping he's on trajectory to absolutely nail it at the Tokyo Olympic Games. Our last team to get underway, South Australia, led by the superstar Matthew Glaetzer. Not his usual position as the starter, but at state team level, it's going to be fast enough, that's for sure. Will it be better than New South Wales? The time to beat is 44.8 seconds. Glaetzer has done his job. Gap has really started to open up though. Hoffman in second position down the back straight. Carismo just trying to stay in the draft, in the slipstream, trying to get himself closer to the back wheel. And Hoffman is now out of the race, and it's down to one rider in Carismo. It's been a hard ride just to get to this point off the back of those super fast riders in Glaetzer and Hoffman. Carismo trying to get better than New South Wales with a 44.8, and it's a 44.9, third fastest time. So very tight between all of the teams. But the second fastest was that combined international team that won't be racing for the medals. So it's the second fastest of the teams that are racing for the medals. So a gold, silver possibility for South Australia still.
Well, you have to say on form with what we saw there, that New South Wales looked a little bit more composed. They went marginally faster, but just based on their form on the bike, I would suggest they look a little bit like fresher horses going into that final. Carlos Carismo did a tremendous job, but when you have Matthew Glaetzer starting, even in a controlled manner, it's a bit of a oxymoron, isn't it, saying Matthew Glaetzer starting in a controlled manner. It still does a lot of damage, and Carismo, that was in many respects a 750-metre individual time trial without a lot of draft effect. We did see the toll that took in the last, particularly 125 metres. So he will need to pay very close attention to trying to recover now between that gold medal ride-off. So New South Wales and South Australia will ride for gold, ACT and Western Australia for that bronze.
It's going to be a fascinating final. It's still close times, but I agree with you. I think New South Wales just looked a little bit more polished, and both teams will come out having had at least a trial now, because the national team members have been off doing all of their trials, but the state teams haven't had that benefit. So now they've had one race in the legs, they will come out, and I would expect to improve their times when they're racing for the medals. It'll be a fantastic final. That's later on tonight. Next race on the track is also a final, and this is going to be as interesting in a different way. It's more of a slow burn. It's the under-19 men's points race final, and it's the next generation perhaps of Cameron Meares, one of our all-time greats in the world of points race riding. Is there another Cameron Meares in there? Someone that is related to a former champion is Cameron Rogers from the ACT. That's him on the right-hand side holding onto the fence, number 27, the nephew of Michael Rogers, multiple times world time trial champion and a former member of the Australian track team back in the day.
Yellow jersey. He wore the yellow jersey at the Tour de France, did he not? If not virtually.
Almost. He was virtually, because he crashed that day
and broke his collarbone. I do remember that in 2007.
Yeah. So we can now say that he would have won that year's tour had he not broken his collarbone. But,
I do remember.
Yes. So Cameron Rogers is one of the favourites, very strong under-19 rider. His father, Peter, I wonder if he is here. I haven't seen Pete. We were teammates together back in the day. And the other uncle, Dean Rogers, was also a superstar at the World Championships in the under-19s time trial. So a lot of pedigree in the family. There's Rogers on the front. And he has been very good in the races leading up to this, in championships last year as well. So a rider to watch from the ACT. Challenge that he does have, though, is he's riding on his own. No teammates for Rogers in this one.
I think in some ways that can be beneficial, because if a break goes up the track, then nobody's going to be looking at him to do the chasing. So he can sit back a little bit and let the other teams play that out. But of course, the counter argument to that is if most of the teams are represented in a breakaway, it will be up to him without a lot of help. So he does need to remain pretty eyes open and diligent. But we've got 100 laps, 25 kilometres, sprint every 10 laps. It's a horrible event. It's a beautiful event, but it is a very tough event.
Describe it in the way Henk Vogel's described it. It's horrible, It's hard, it's tough, it's gritty.
I love it.
And I love it. So the lads have had their 20-kilometre scratch, or 10-kilometre, scratch race on the first night. That was won by Dylan Ether of New South Wales. Taron Cook from Victoria was second, and Finn Walsh from Queensland was third. So we'll see how those riders fare. It's not always the correct form guide, the scratch race, for the points race, a very different type of race. And at the moment, the early laps, all the riders just doing very short turns of pace on the front, getting up out of the way, nobody wanting to hurt the legs too much by pushing the wind. And I'd say with coming around to get 93 laps to go, the first sprint's not too far away, and things will change a little bit after that. Keep an eye out for the young South Australian, Zach Marriage. Teamed up with Zimmerman yesterday to win the under-19 Madison. But Marriage is very, very handy in this type of race. Strong rider indeed, small of stature, but gee, he's got some go. So he's another one to look out for. Number 50, Zach Marriage, riding for South Australia.
Now we've got quite a few riders. The Tasmanian team, I think, is something, a pairing that we really need to look at. They were great in the Madison, but Dalton Stretton had a good ride. One of the biggest takeaways I had from watching them in the Madison was that they had a whole lot of horsepower, but maybe hadn't quite evolved strategically. But a points race is a bit of a different beast in that one.
Coming around to get the first bell for the sprints. So the first of the intermediate sprints, 5, 3, 2 and 1 points on offer. Final sprint carries double points, and it's Dylan Ether in the New South Wales colours in second position, that's been looking over his shoulder. Just drifts up around the outside, not that explosive, don't want to do too much too soon, but he'll do enough to get the 5 points. 3 points for Rogers in second place. And then coming through from Western Australia in third there, that was John Carter. So good little pick up of points from Dylan Ether. He won the scratch race, now he's picked up the first sprint. A little bit of an attack there from the Victorian rider. That was Taron Cook, who was second in the scratch race on the first night for the under-19 men. And just coming through now there, you can see the South Australian in the middle of the track swinging up. That's Zach Marriage, one to watch later in this race. I do feel that the longer it goes on, the more Marriage will be able to do the Cameron Meyer style of attacking. That's what he's really looking for. Harder the race is, that's the type of rider that really does then start to come into their own.
Yeah, he reminded me a lot of Luke Plapp in the Madison last night. I really liked his style of riding. He looked very confident. He looked very in control by the end of the race. They all had steam coming out of their ears because with only 8 teams, it was really tough. There was absolutely nowhere to hide. But I think that Marriage and Zimmerman did a tremendous job, and Marriage was probably the standout between them there. But there's a few interesting dynamics, I think, not only within the states, but also between some of the pairings that we saw be so successful last night. And the Queenslanders, of course, they're in front of a home crowd and they know the track very well. They train on it week in and week out. The track does make a difference in a points race, Scott, because every single metre that you pedal counts. And knowing when to swing up, when to come back on, using the bank in the most efficient way, by the end of 100 laps, that can really make a big difference.
A lot of people do assume that all the tracks are the same, but they're certainly not. A little bit of pace now coming on from the Victorians. Yard comes through from Queensland and is quickly up and out of the way. Starting to get close now to the second of our intermediate sprints. So Dylan Ether leads the points race on 5 points ahead of Cameron Rogers on 3, John Carter on 2, and Leo Zimmerman, Madison champion from last night, is on 1 point from South Australia. And now really bunched up as they come around for the second of the sprints. Another 5 points on offer, and the pace was off just for a little bit, but not anymore as they go through. It's the Victorian rider. It's Haraba down the back straight. You can pencil in 5 points for him. He's gapped them very much as he's come around to pick up the 5 points. Yard in second, Rogers in third, and Cook it was across the line in 4th place. So
not the most efficient way to get yourself 5 points. A lot of energy was burned doing that. You know, I'm all about efficiency in a points
spectacular
race.
Though. It was spectacular. He was doing it for the TV. He saw the cameras and went for it.
Crowd at home, on your feet, give him a cheer. Honestly, though, I think if you can win by the least margin possible, that will really help you overall. That takes a lot of control. We don't often see the consistency of that at junior level because they are learning to race. They also don't know their competitors quite as well as in the senior ranks where you've been racing together for a little bit longer there as well. And the strategy does evolve. I think I remember watching Michael Rogers in a points race at the National Championships in Chandler, the outdoor Chandler, of course. And he tried to take a lap, Scott, and he literally got 3 metres off the back of the bunch and he never got on. He then got reabsorbed back into the bunch.
Soft.
Well, it scarred me. Like, I remember watching it and viscerally feeling it and thinking, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's got to hurt.
And when I was doing points racing, that always stuck with me. Like, you have to find a way to get what you need done in the most efficient possible way and avoid any of those massive effort for little gain kind of disasters.
Come around for 75 laps to go. Cameron Rogers and Dylan Ether lead the way, having, 3 riders, sorry. Jackson Hribar as well. So 3 riders on 5 points, Rogers, Ether and Hribar. ACT, New South Wales and Victoria. Then on 3 points is Mitchell Yard from Queensland. John Carter is from Western Australia, is on 2. And then 2 riders on 1 point. Leo Zimmerman from South Australia and Taron Cook, the silver medalist from the scratch race on night 1. He's on 1 point as well. So 6 riders in the points after 2 sprints.
I like that. That there's 6 riders. It shows the race is still a little bit open and everybody's trying to kind of establish their ground and test the waters a bit. I'm not sure what to call that move from the South Australian. It wasn't really an attack. It was kind of a roll to the front and accelerate. It can do a little bit of damage, but I'll keep banging on about the efficient way to do it, Scott, and I'm not sure that if you really intend to force a break, that is quite the way to approach it.
Well, they're coming around to get the next of the sprints, and it's Leo Zimmerman that zimmed off the front there, but not at full speed to go and really get this sprint. So he's now been reabsorbed back into the field, and it's Stretton down the back straight from Tasmania, looking comfortable at the moment. Dalton Stretton, and he looks like he has done enough to pick up the next sprint as well. So 3 sprints and 3 different winners. So this is showing some real competitiveness, real spread of a mix of riders in these opening points. But the pace has not really been on. This is really the first proper attack now that's come after the third sprint. So the riders aren't too fatigued just yet, and then already that has been neutralised. Queensland still pushing forward a little bit. And the update on points, Dylan Ether now, after picking up a couple of points that time through, has now got a slight buffer in the overall standing. So he goes on to 7 points. Cameron Rogers, Hribar and Stretton after winning the last sprint on 5. So still very close, nice even spread, but it hasn't been a hard race yet.
I really liked Dalton Stretton for the points race, so I just really was impressed with what we saw in the Madison. A lot of power, really good turn of speed, possibly not the patience that we like to see yet, and that we do see in the slightly more mature riders, but I think he's got a lot of pizzazz. So if he can get a few sneaky points in there and not burn too many matches by going for those 5-pointers, I think in the back end of the race he might be in quite good shape.
65 laps to go, 100 laps in total. We've had 3 sprints. They're coming out every 10, and double points for the final sprint. Still very close, and a pretty good spread of points amongst the young riders here. It's the under-19 men's points race here at the AusCycling Track National Championships in Brisbane. And as the pace comes off, a little bit of an acceleration, and you can see everybody still fresh enough to scramble after the wheels in front of them. And once again, it's Taron Cook. He's had a couple of little digs like this as well, so he seems eager, the Victorian, to try and make this race as hard as possible. They're sprinting for points. We didn't mention that if you do take a lap on the field, you get 20 points for that. So a big effort to get a lap on the field, but you are really rewarded with those 20 bonus points. If you lose a lap, if you get dropped from the peloton, then you are minus 20 points.
Well, there's 2 ways for breakaways to go from attacks. One is that almighty from the top of the track gap opener that really people have to respond to very quickly, otherwise the gap blows open. Or it's more of a passive go to the front and push the pace, but it's pretty early in the race to try for that one, Scott.
Mitchell Yard at 61 laps to go. These sprints just keep coming thick and fast. This will be the 4th of them, and it's Mitchell Yard in the Queensland colours. Little bit of move from Stretton, is it? That's coming up around the outside, and Yard will hold on. So Yard holds on. It was Hamish McKenzie, who rode in the Madison for the silver medal last night with Dalton Stretton from Tasmania. So that was a big effort from those riders. Now the opportunities are starting, potentially, to open up for the attacks. They've had a couple of chases now, a couple of little attacks, a few more sprints in the legs. Now's the time for some of the stronger riders to really have a go, and that's what we're seeing here with one of the Victorians that's already started to push ahead. That's Alex Jones.
Well, the Tasmanians are sitting at the back of the bunch now after their sprint efforts. They do need to move up a bit. That's pretty dangerous to be down the back. That usually indicates a bit of fatigue when you swing up and go all the way to the back, so they need to really keep notice of that, because this is really stringing out. We're starting to see the race turning a bit, Scott. This is going from everybody rolling around and just getting warmed up in the sprints to some play attacks, if you will, people testing legs and different riders forcing the pace just to see what happens. We might start to see a bit more coordination between the states here as well.
Peloton looking very different than it did in those first opening laps. You can see really strung out, Kate, and a few little gaps in the middle here as well. So the gaps that the riders trying to close those down, it's taking a little bit longer as they're starting to get a little bit more tired. Then they start looking at how many laps to go it is. The next sprint's not too far away. Do I start to try and recover a little bit for that? What about positioning? This is where the race really starts to get very tough as we almost hit the halfway point at 54 laps to go.
Usually on the curtain, the blue point on the track, which can be quite slippery incidentally, it's painted. We have the coaching staff and they stand out there and they do direct the riders. I used to have Gary Sutton standing trackside, and seeing him gave me an immense amount of calm in what is always a very stormy points race. Because of COVID, the coaches aren't actually allowed up there. So these riders to a degree are flying a little bit more blind, and they do have to communicate with each other and their state teammates, but they do need to figure out what's going on themselves, looking at the scoreboard and also getting a bit of a temperature. The first significant attack we've seen here, Scott, now, and this is Jackson Herbar, who has belted off the front. He's joined by Aston Freeth, and he was the young rider that we saw lead out that first sprint, to no avail, I might add, but he will pick up some points here. But the field, they might have to start getting a bit more organised because this gap has really opened up.
Well, we can see those two riders out in front definitely will pick up the major points. 5 points to Victoria with Herbar, and then second across the line, that's Freeth. So that's 5 and 3. Then a real sprint for third. Looks like it was Rogers that may have come across the line to pick up the 2 points that are on offer to win the bunch sprint. And now it'll be a real test to see what the peloton does. The two out in front have continued on, perhaps not quite as fast as they were before that last sprint. But as long as they stay bunched up, they have an opportunity here to really just pry open the gap and get themselves out around half a lap or so.
Well, here's the interesting dynamic, Scott, because I wouldn't have said that this pairing are necessarily the strongest breakaway companions, and we've just seen them split up and give up essentially. But as we're doing that, and he'll come into frame now, look at this from Western Australia. We've got a flyer. He's gone straight past them, and he is moving at serious speed. That's John Carter. This is very significant, Scott. The bunch is reacting, but it might be too late. He almost has half a lap.
When he first made the attack, I think he was thinking that there was an opportunity to bridge across and have three riders out in front, but as he hit the bottom of the track in front of the peloton, he saw them swing up in front and realised this was going to be a very difficult solo effort. He is about half a lap to the back of the peloton. That's where he needs to get to, not the front. So big performance here from Carter. 45 laps to go for him. Remember, if you get a lap on the field, it's 20 points added. You may pick up some points along the way in any sprints while you're out there. And it was a very fast acceleration, opened up a big gap, but you can see he is starting to slow down a little bit. The arms are a bit straighter. He's sitting up a little bit higher now on the bike. I'm not sure how long this one's going to last.
I think he's possibly wishing he had a teammate or two or brake companion out there. It's all over Red Rover there. For Carter, he's going to swing up the track. Jackson Herbar, he is leading it all at the moment, but only on 10 points, Scott. This is a very tight race. The top five separated only by 4-point differential, with the Victorian leading. Mitchell Yard is in second. Cam Rogers in third. Dylan Ether on equal third. Dylan Stretton, the Tasmanian rider, he is then on 6 points. Wide open, and we are getting into the point of the race where the legs are starting to fatigue. Even the mental acuity of the riders is starting to fade. This is often where it very quickly gets interesting. They'll come around now and receive the bell.
41 laps to go it is. Herbar from Victoria leads in the overall standings, but it's Rogers down the back straight chasing the 5 points. He sits in third place overall on 7 points. This will be good enough to become the new virtual race leader. So Rogers picks up 5. That'll put him up to 12. And Herbar wasn't there in the points that time. So that's a nice little buffer there for Rogers. He'll go above Herbar in the overall standings. So Cameron Rogers, not the first time we've seen the name Rogers leading a national points race championship, but he still has 39 laps to go.
Likely not the last time that we'll hear that Rogers name, dare I say. We are starting to see the signs of some fatigue, and that's when a rider does an effort but then just swings up after a sprint because they just need to take a bit of a breather. Look at this, a march from the Queenslanders, but in response to a solid attack from South Australia. This is turning into a habit from this South Australian team. I think, Scott, they're in a pretty coordinated effort amongst them to get a breakaway going.
This is very dangerous. It was Zach Meares. We spoke about him at the start of the race, say that he was very dangerous. He wanted the race to be as hard as possible, and this is why, because he's so strong. He's now dragging a group of 4 off the front. 3 are scrambling to get across as well, and Rogers is one of them. So Cameron Rogers has made his way across from the ACT. He is the race leader at the moment on 12 points. Sitting in second place on 10 is Jackson Hribar from Victoria. And now they've all eased up. Too many riders out in the front group and nobody really willing to push on. All the big favourites made their way across. And now it'll be a little bit of a scramble for the rest of the field to try and get themselves back across before the next sprint.
Well,
now it's a completely different bike race now. We had a sprint match to start with, but now it's really getting to what we know from points races. It's a grind.
Now, Stretton and Mackenzie are finding themselves, they're in the front of that split there, but this is why I said earlier that it makes me very nervous when they go to the back of the bunch, because those gaps can open up so quickly, and if the move just goes at the front while someone's taking a breather at the back, well, then it is absolutely no bueno for the outcome of that. You can see the body language. I shouldn't laugh, Scott. I know how painful a points race is, but in the first couple of laps, they all looked fresh as daisies. They're starting to drop those shoulders. They're rolling around on the bike a little bit more, and the biggest give is the old head drop when they start looking down at their legs, almost as if to say, are you still there? Are you working? Where is the power? But it is getting tough. They'll come around for the bell again with 31 laps left to race.
Little bit of a breather from the riders there, only for a couple of laps. And he was leading for a moment, and this is Mitchell Yard, and he's going to try and put himself right back at the top of the table as well, the Queenslander. A flashy bike across the line. Mitchell Yard comes away with the 5 points. So that's a good result for him. He'll go up to 13 points. Cameron Rogers was, I think, perhaps in the points then as well, though, so may not change the outright leader, but Cameron Rogers, Jackson Hribar, Mitchell Yard, Dylan Ether. Haven't seen a lot of Dylan from the last few sprints, so Yard, Stretton, Rogers and Ether. Now he comes up with 1 point. So Cameron Rogers, the race leader, was able to pick up 2 points then. He'll go to 14. Yard up to 13. Jackson Hribar now sits just in behind them.
Well, Jack Menzies, the Tasmanian rider, he just came through for a turn of pace. I think that the Tasmanian team are now going to start to band together quite well to try and get Stretton up on that podium. It's possibly going slightly differently to plan, though. Jack Menzies has opened up a bit of a gap here. This has thrown a cat amongst the pigeons. Look at how strung out it is behind, having to chase. There's ones, there's twos. The riders have to be very conscious. And Scott, very dangerous. Look at the riders at the very back of this pack that we're just seeing now. That's the 2 Tasmanians. They're Stretton and Mackenzie. So while Menzies goes off the front, his teammates are getting caught right at the back. Pretty dangerous situation.
And the second place overall, which is Mitchell Yard, he's also now jumped out into this second group. Zach Meares is there as well. Meares doesn't have any points, though. He's a fair way down in the overall standings, but he's just really strong. He wants to try and gain a lap and pick up the 20 points that are on offer. But Mitchell Yard has got himself now out into that second group. The overall leader, Cameron Rogers, is back in the peloton. He's not on the front of the peloton chasing. He's still sitting on wheels and trying to rest a little bit. But he needs to pay attention. This gap could really open up with our Tasmanians still trying to hold on. He needs to swing up now and jump onto the back of this group because it's been a big effort over these last couple of laps.
Well, I think Menzies is toast based on the body language. He's missed his opportunity to swing up, get some recovery and rejoin this.
Well, that was a big
now
mistake.
Break.
That was a big mistake by Menzies. He should have swung to the top of the track and then used the banking to come back down onto the rear wheel. He's had to now accelerate in the saddle on the bottom of the track to get up to speed with that group. That would have hurt him a lot. While that's all happened, it's all come back together, and it's New South Wales that have closed the gap. And next of our sprint laps, at 21 laps to go, it's Ether. I just mentioned, where did Ether get to? Well, now he's back into the race and he's gone right around the front. He might not be able to hold on to this one though. Queensland trying to come around as well. Also, Haribar is in the mix coming through.
Well, that's Efren Martinson who took the 5 points there. Yet again, another rider who hasn't to this moment earned any points. So we have another sprint winner again. I don't recall the last time I watched a points race with so many different individual sprint winners. So this is a race that has provided quite a lot of entertainment so far. They've got 19 laps to go, Scott. This is really the worst part of the race because a lot can still happen. Dylan Ether, pardon me. He was really starting. He's almost had a bit of the bobblehead head action going there because that took a lot of energy in that last sprint to get those third points. But Haribar, well, he's back, edging back toward the top of that table. So Rogers leads ahead of Yard. Haribar sitting in third. In fourth, we've got Dylan Ether and Dalton Stretton also in equal fourth. Only 5 points between the leader and fifth place. Tasmania on the move again, but they are actually chasing across to a dangerous duo up the front here that's managed to get that gap. Leo Zimmerman, we saw him in the Madison last night, take the gold medal.
Andre Dubier as well is up there. So they're the two riders off the front, Zimmerman and Dubier. Dubier from New South Wales, Zimmerman from South Australia. Three riders just behind them and a scramble back in the peloton. Now there's only 2 sprints left to go. 5 points for maximum on the next one at 10 laps, but double points on the final sprint. So still 15 points can be won, and it's still only 5 points between first and fourth. So this is still anyone's race with 2 sprints left to come. Rogers on 15, Yard on 13, Haribar on 13, Ether on 10 and Stretton on 10. And we're coming around to get 13 laps to go. The penultimate sprint not far away, but still 15 points up. This is anyone's.
Well, remembering that there is double points on that final sprint. So once again, Tasmania with the bottom of the track attack. I'm not sure on the logic behind that one, positioning maybe, but it's Jack Menzies again. I think that he has definitely been sent out by his teammates to just see what damage he can enact. In fact, I'm wrong. It's Hamish McKenzie, so one of the very dynamic riders we saw in the Madison last night. The pairing of McKenzie and Stretton made quite a big impact.
They'll come around to get the penultimate bell of the under-19 men's points race, and Rogers will lead them through. He's leading the overall classification. He's on 15 points, only 2 ahead of Yard. And this one, Haribar from Victoria, he sits in third place, a second as well on 13, trying to get up around Rogers. Cameron Rogers holds on. That's another 5 points to him. That'll take him to 20. Haribar is on 13, picked up 3 points then. He'll go to 16 points. And they now have started to open up a gap on the rest of the field with still one more sprint to come.
Whoa, one more sprint.
Big one, though.
It's a very big one. This has turned into a very tight race in the end. Oh, a touch of wheels and some riders are down. Hamish McKenzie was one of those that went down. Jackson Haribar.
The rider, second place overall, has gone down. Jackson Haribar.
This is going to mess with that scoreboard because, Scott, he's not getting up in a hurry. He has stood up, but he's sat back down again. It looks like he's in a bit of trouble. Likewise, Hamish McKenzie has actually not sat up yet. I hate seeing that. We all do.
They do have 5 laps to get back into the race. That will not be possible for Jackson Haribar because he has broken his bike. So you can change your wheels, get back out there. But unless he has a spare bike on the side of the track, which I doubt, Jackson Hribar, who sits in second place in the overall standings, coming to the final sprint, will not be able to get back onto the track, even if he is physically able, because he has broken his bike. So that's such a shame for the young Victorian.
Well, he's taken his helmet off. He's actually very emotional. Scott, he's having a bit of a cry on the infield there. I think it's as much in frustration as it is in pain. A lot of disappointment for the young man.
Adam Freeth was also one of the riders down. Jackson Hribar, Freeth and Hamish McKenzie from Tasmania. So we won't be seeing... Freeth is trying to come back in. He'll get back in before the final kilometre. So you have to be back in the race before 1 kilometre to go. And Freeth has been able to do that. The other riders, though, unfortunately, still laying on the side of the track. McKenzie is still laying down, and Jackson Hribar has stood up and is walking away from the accident now. So that's good to see. And we come around with 3 laps to go. Cameron Rogers has just, by default, opened up more of a buffer because the second place rider has now crashed out of the race. So this all goes to the favour of Cameron Rogers from the ACT, the only rider from Canberra in the race, and he's leading the way on 20 points. The rider to watch now is Mitchell Yard, who is on 13 points, back in third place. He could still beat Rogers if he wins this final sprint.
If he takes first or second and Rogers has no points, then he can beat him. All Rogers really needs to do in theory is follow Mitchell Yard. They're coming around to the bell. Scott Yard in second wheel. He's making the move.
Mitchell Yard from Queensland comes around the outside. Rogers is on the wheel in second place as well. John Carter from Western Australia trying to come up also. But it's Yard from Queensland that looks like he might be able to hold on for the final double point sprint, and he does. That was a great sprint to win the final one, but it was the guy that ran second that will win the overall race. Cameron Rogers from the ACT will win the under-19 men's points race here at the AusCycling National Track Championships, and the legacy continues. The famous Rogers family continue to come up with champions. What a great ride.
Well, what a great ride from Rogers, and I'm very pleased to see Hamish McKenzie there. Also getting up off the curtain there. He, to date, hadn't been able to get up. Always disappointing to see them fall, but good to see that. And Rogers, well, look, he's getting the air in. He's certainly worked very hard to do that in the end. He will take the win by 3 or 4 points, if I calculate that correctly, based on the 10 that Mitchell Yard got at the finish there.
Should be 3 points, I think, Kate. So 20 points coming into it. Picked up 6 points for finishing second. Will take him to 26. Mitchell Yard, who went in there at third place on 13, got the 10 points. He'll go to 23. Leapfrog over Jackson Hribar and pick up the silver medal. So Mitchell Yard with a great final sprint to win the silver medal. And disappointment there for Jackson Hribar, not having the opportunity to try and defend that second place or go for gold, having crashed out before the final sprint.
A big show of emotion from the young man too, but he can be very proud of what he did out there, and what will be will be. There'll be plenty more bike races left for him to challenge for and to win. Mitchell Yard, he was really consistent, just chipped away, and good show of speed at the end. He really was in control of that final sprint, and all Rogers had to do was follow him to the line, essentially. He did a good job of that as well.
Well, after the first, say, 20, 30 laps, where they really did just race it, that was where the crash happened. It was Mitchell Yard had gone up around the outside, dived down the track to chase the wheels in front of him at the bottom of the track, and perhaps, not sure, may not have been quite concentrating, but we saw Hribar just clip that wheel and go down. So perhaps not a fault of his own. That's the final sprint there. That's what got the Queenslander into the silver medal by winning that final sprint. But Michael Rogers had done enough. He was consistent. He had no teammates. He had to do it all on his own. And he came away second in that final sprint, and more than enough to win by my calculation, 3 points. We are still waiting for the final confirmation of the point standings, but a quick calculation for gold and silver has Michael Rogers ahead of Mitchell Yard. Michael Rogers. I said Michael Rogers. Cameron Rogers.
How many more times will you say that? A lot, I say.
Yeah, ahead of Peter Rogers. I mean Dean Rogers. I mean Cameron.
Well, Scott, while they're calculating that, I want to take a bit of a moment to have a shout out to a very loved member of the Brisbane cycling community, Kathy Peel. She's in hospital at the moment, getting her health sorted. And we want to send lots of love and strength and best wishes to her, one of the most familiar faces in the chicks who ride bikes community, and certainly a very big character. So, Kathy, we're sending you lots of love and strength, and we hope to see you out here soon.
We can just see a little bit of repair being done to the track.
Are they using a Dyson, Scott? It looks like they're using a Dyson.
Can we talk brands? I'm not sure. It's one of those
Sorry, a
handheld
vacuum cleaner.
A cordless vacuum cleaner of some sort. Louise Jones, who is the chief commissaire here this week, former Commonwealth champion herself, very established rider. Her daughter, actually, Hayley, is coaching the Queenslanders and went in the team pursuit team with them the other day as well. But they needed a fourth rider, so the coach said, well, I'll step up and have a go as well.
Well, she rode the Commonwealth Games here for Wales back in 2018.
Little bit of repair, so I always check after a crash like that just to make sure that the pedals or the axles haven't dug something out of the track to create a splinter that could puncture the tyres in the next races. Sometimes those splinters get picked up by the riders themselves and carted off the track in a body part somewhere.
Only to grow out in the resulting weeks.
Well, disappointment there in the Tasmanian camp. Unfortunate for Hamish McKenzie.
He looks quite defeated, doesn't he, the young man? The look on his face is very resigned to the fact that he'll wake up tomorrow sticking to the bed sheets and without a medal in his pocket, unfortunately.
The glamour. The glamour of cycling, road rash and track burn. So still just checking, making sure everything's safe and ready to go for the next races. And you can see it here, just as Mitchell goes around the outside, that's when Jackson was clipped on the front wheel. So it may not have been, he may have been looking over his left shoulder and not seen Mitchell Yard come around, and that's why he hit the wheel. Or it could have been perhaps a slightly over-aggressive move from Mitchell himself to dive back down the track and take the front wheel out. So I'm not too sure from that angle which of those scenarios it was, but still very unfortunate to have to crash out. He snapped his forks when he went down. So not when he went down, I think it was when the riders that hit his bike further down the track, that's when the front wheel came out after snapping the fork blade. So there was no chance for Haribar to get back into the race, even if he had the time to do it.
Oh, they're the moments that you hope they're academy bikes and not their own when something like that happens.
I'm pretty sure that one's not.
No.
Ouch, Mum and Dad wouldn't have been too happy about that.
There's a lot of banks of mum and dad that support a lot of these athletes. They're pretty lucky. When the tape goes down on the track, which we've just seen, that is because they can't completely sand out those splinters, which mostly cause flat tyres, which is why they need to keep those flat. So, that was just an unfortunate timing for Rebar, who moved up at the same time that attack went. You do have to be so vigilant when you do swing up in any capacity. So,
when I see these, in our situation, in our capacity with our experience, Kate, I feel that we can put our opinion into these situations.
Oh boy, what's coming?
And I feel that was the fault of the Queenslander, Mitchell Yard, not just paying enough attention to the rider that he'd just overtaken and just came down the track a bit too fast, a bit too soon, and took the front wheel out of young Jackson. Racing incident, wouldn't have been any malice in it. He was just desperate to get to the bottom of the track and chase those riders that have gone on the attack. But regardless of that, I do feel that the young Queenslander may have been at fault there.
Oh, we just got a little crowd shot. I saw Selena.
Email Kate Bates if you've got anything else to say about that.
Yeah, topic change. I saw Selena Green sitting in there. She's one of the biggest advocates for women's cycling in Queensland. She rides for the Moreton Bay Cycling Club and runs what they call the Bell Squad. It might sound like a nice little ladies' club, but actually Bell refers to the Belvedere, which is the pub at Woody Point. So the pub supports that team, so it's fabulous to see them out here supporting the racing.
They are getting ready for the next round of the men's team sprints, but I can say they have not confirmed the results of the under-19 men's points race. So there's no danger to Cameron Rogers winning the overall. That was quite clear, no infringements, no issues. But I wonder if it is that incident involving Mitchell Yard and Jackson Hribar that they are actually looking at. I can't think of another reason that they would be taking this long to come up with the official results of the under-19 points race.
Well, I think when there is an incident like that, it is prudent that they spend a little bit of time taking a look at what has happened.
Well, after the break, we will come back with the official results, hopefully, of the under-19 team points race. And we will be back, though, with the big boys, the fast men, in the men's team sprint.
Come and discover the epic wonders, the friendly faces, and incredible new adventures that will change you and the way you see the world. Right here in Queensland.
My happiness is slowly creeping back. Now you're at home. I know what is inside. It seems an age since I've seen you. Countdown as the weeks trickle into days. I hope that time hasn't changed you. My happiness is slowly creeping back. Now you're at home.
Welcome back to the Meares Velodrome here in Brisbane for the AusCycling Track National Championships. And we still are waiting for confirmation of the final standings of the under-19 men's points race. What I was saying before the break does appear to be what they are discussing. The infringement from Mitchell Yard that caused the crash that took out Jackson Hribar was in second place overall. So Yard was in third coming into the final sprint. Hribar was in second and was unable to get back up with a broken bike to contest the final sprint. So my understanding is they are indeed deliberating about what they should do from that situation. And my hunch is that Mitchell might be in a little bit of trouble here. So you can see it there as he came around the outside of the Victorian, the Queensland rider, just basically took his front wheel out, chopped him in half as he came down the track desperately to get down to the riders at the bottom of the track. And my instinct tells me that there could possibly be a relegation from the final sprint for Mitchell Yard, even though it was 8 laps from the finish. This will be the controversial part. It's 8 laps from the sprint. It wasn't in the sprint, but they are just looking at the regulation to see what infringement they can or should give to Mitchell Yard, and it may be a relegation of the final sprint, which will take the 10 points he won for being first across the line away from his total. So that will definitely take him out of the silver medal position. He may still be able to hold on to bronze. We'll just have to wait and see. So we'll come back with that one once we know officially. Cameron Rogers has definitely been the rider that won the points race for the under-19s. That is clear. Who gets the silver and bronze? That is still being discussed off the track. So we're back to the men's team sprint. This is the international team lining up in the front straight. So the combined international team, Azizul Awang, Shah also from Malaysia. So the two riders in the black colours, Awang and Shah. Shane Perkins from Russia making up the international combination of 3. So Perkins will take them out and they'll be racing the combined state team on the other side of the track. Byron Davies from Queensland, Sam Gallagher and Ned Pollard. With both these teams unable to race into the medal rounds because of the combination nature, and already an issue with the the state combined team. So an issue with these lads. Perkins was up to full speed almost by the time they fired the gun to stop this particular race. They're racing for 5th and 6th place because they are two combined teams, meaning they're not allowed to go into the overall medals. And you saw it there. It was Ned Pollard quickly raised his hand to say that there was some sort of mechanical issue. May have pulled his foot out of the pedal. Didn't quite catch what it was exactly, but yeah, certainly an issue there. They will, if the officials deem that it was, look closely at the rider on the inside. I'm still not sure exactly what it was, Kate.
Blew a foo-foo valve, perhaps. I'm not sure. That was a very nondescript mechanical there, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. May have just not been happy with how he felt. Could I do that again, please?
No, he was like, all right, let's try that again. Good to note that they had a false start in their first crack at this as well. So maybe a few nerves out there from the young New South Wales riders.
Very interesting. We saw how Shane Perkins absolutely powered out of the starting blocks. Has to do it all again now. He'll put this down to a good training effect. No issues for him. And this is where Shane Perkins, you can just see that power. He really has put on a lot of bulk in the last couple of years as well. And we talking earlier before the start with his wife Christine as well. Both of them looking incredibly strong and fit. Very fitness and nutrition orientated.
Well, I think Christine is hanging around in the CrossFit world these days, and she would be pretty formidable. And Shane, he's looking a little bit Thor-like these days. Like, he really has worked a lot on that musculature, and it
just needs a beard.
Seems to be bad. Well, maybe, you know, Chris Hemsworth is just down the road. Maybe they've been training, sharing training tips.
I was down his way actually not that long ago, standing at the front gate of Hemsworth's property.
Indeed. What? And pray tell, Scott, what were you doing standing at the gate? Oh, look at those biceps.
Talk about Christine Perkins. There she is. Now, if she wanted to stay as a cyclist, I think she would have been capable of anything she wanted to do. She was so fast, Christine.
She was a tremendous athlete, and she remains a tremendous athlete, just no longer a cyclist, but very dedicated to the craft. They've got a great family fitness thing going where they really support each other's goals, and they have both continued into their mid-30s, really building on that strength and power, which is something to really envy.
Might get an arm flex from her next time. Can we send a message down to Christine?
Yeah, give her a heads up.
Give us a bit of a bicep flex. Well, Shane Kelly on the inside, the coach of the Victorians, helping out this mixed team with two of his riders there from Victoria. And just asking if Ned's comfortable this time to have another go.
I want to find out what that mechanical was in the end. Perhaps a pulled wheel. I mean, that would make a bit of sense.
Because the foot didn't come out of the pedal, unless he felt maybe the strap tear or something, but I didn't see them replace anything. So I'm not too sure exactly what it was. Shane Kelly, yeah, didn't want to say it, but if it was a pulled foot, well, he's the most infamous person in that regard of the 96 Olympic Games. We'll put that behind us.
Don't want to say it, but say it anyway.
Yeah. Here we go. So this is the race for 5th and 6th, even though the international combined team were a little bit faster than where they're racing now. This is only because they're not eligible to go for the medal rounds. And once more, Shane Perkins leads the internationals away, and Ned Pollard gets past the point where he stopped last time. So the combined state team now up to speed as well. Perkins down the back straight after half a lap, absolutely powering. The amount of wattage that he's putting through those pedals is extraordinary, up towards 2,500 watts as he completes his first lap and unleashes Azazul Awang. Victorians and the Queenslanders slightly behind, but we saw that also in the seeding runs as well. And now the last riders from both teams, and it's a little bit closer this time. 0.06 of a second as it was with 1 lap to go. Very, very close indeed. And Davies it is that really is bringing them home. And this is going to be a little bit of an upset between these two teams. And Byron Davies comes away with the faster time at the end for his combination. So the combined state team getting the better of the combined internationals this time with a time of 45.179. So they rode quite significantly faster than they did in the previous round.
Well, and conversely to that, the international team with Shane Perkins from Russia and the Malaysians, they went significantly slower than they did in that first round. They're not a combination or a pairing that usually works together. Shane Perkins is certainly out there to do what he needs to do, as are the Malaysian pairing. What it is great to see, though, is them able to get the racing in, and it's entertaining to watch. I love watching these internationals come out and give it a crack against the Australian teams. And our state teams have fared pretty well, actually, in the timing stakes. Isn't the team sprint exciting when they're racing each other, when they're just qualifying? You're just really staring at the riders and the times and the clock, but that there's such another dynamic when you're seeing how each rider compares and how the overall team is comparing across the track.
Yeah, just to back up your point there, Kate, so the combined international team rode 44.85 in their qualifying and then 46.3 in that race just then. So very, very much slower the second time round. It'd be interesting to see the lap time of Shane Perkins, though, because he was incredibly fast in both of the races, and here just to do a real trial for himself to see how quick he can be in race conditions. He's not getting the opportunities the Australians are getting to combine together with the national team, obviously being based, he's now in Perth with the rest of the Russian team back overseas. So he's doing a lot of work on his own. I guess that is the one part of a team sprint that you pretty much can train on your own, being the first rider to start position.
Yeah, it is. If you do have to train solo, training, they can feel quite confident that he will be able to get everything he needs done. Of course, it's been a very atypical year of preparation for everybody. Just a bit of a replay, and we can see Byron Davies took it all the way to the line, hit a few of those timing cushions that were on the edge there, because when you've got your head down and you're just pushing hard, that's easy to do.
Well, we'll see the race for medals in the team sprint coming up a little bit later. And we've got the 5th and 6th with the combined teams out of the way now. And we'll see the races for bronze, silver and gold a little bit later in the program. Now we go back to the elite men's Omnium. This is the final discipline in the Omnium event. It's the points race. So all of the points that they've been able to gather throughout the race, they start with in this one. So they're not racing just for points within this particular discipline. All of the points they gain through the points race get added to their overall tally. So this one will be very interesting indeed. Jensen Plowright does lead the way on 116 points, but he's only 2 points ahead of Liam Walsh. So the Victorian, 2 points over the Queenslander. So that's not very much indeed. Then it's 14 points back to 100. Ryan Schilt in 3rd place overall, and Josh Duffy on 96 in 4th. So you expect Plowright to be closely watching Walsh, perhaps also Schilt, maybe a bit about Duffy, but that could lead Graham Frisley or Oliver Bledden, Rowan Hayden-Smith, who are a little bit further down, to get the opportunity to maybe go for a lap and pick up the 20 points that are on offer for gaining a lap. So 100 laps at the track, sprint every 10, 5, 3, 2 and 1 points, and double points for the final sprint. 20 points added if you gain a lap, 20 points deducted if you lose a lap.
Now, a bit of a different dynamic to a normal points race too, because they've already established a lead out there as well. Of course, Plowright is in the lead at the moment. Liam Walsh very closely behind in 2nd. So there's a lot more knowing exactly who you have to watch from the start. So Plowright and Walsh could effectively get 5th and 6th in this and still get 1st and 2nd overall. So it is different to a standalone points race, and I think we can expect to see a bit more negative racing as some riders just follow around other riders they need to watch, as well as maybe some opportunistic efforts from some riders who are a little bit further down overall, but think they've got nothing to lose.
Team tactics certainly can play a massive role in the points race, the final discipline. So we can just see a few of the riders further down. 11th place, Declan Tresize. He's a rider to look out for actually in the future. Very good, promising young rider. But Jensen Plowright on 16, 2 point buffer if you want to call it that, over Liam Walsh.
Well, that's kind of nothing going into this kind of race when so many points are available. But interesting to see the attacks go from that first lap. This is not going to be an easy 100 laps. They're 5 laps in already. Sprint every 10 laps.
And a strong man to go off the front to start with, James Moriarty. So we saw him finish second in the individual pursuit. An incredible comeback to almost get the better of Connor Lay from Western Australia. Only 0.2 of a second in it at the end, and the gap had gone out to over 2 seconds midway through the race. So this guy knows how to do a time trial. He can pursuit. He's out in front of the points race now on his own, and the gap about a quarter of a lap at the moment. In terms of the overall standings, though, Moriarty is down in 12th place overall, and he's only on 58 points. So if he gains a lap on the field now, he'll go to 78. Still doesn't worry the leaders like Plowright and Walsh. And this is what we're talking about, Kate, isn't it? So some of the riders that are further down in the overall classification, if they go off the front, the big guys racing for the medals are not going to be too fazed by this. And they may get their opportunity to go and take a lap on the field as we go into the first of our intermediate sprints. 5 points will definitely go the way of James Moriarty. And back in the peloton, no big moves just yet. Victorians sitting in first and second in the peloton as they go across the line. And as they pop across, it was Henry Dietz that picked up the 3 points and just in front of Patrick Eddy. So there's Pat Eddy on the red bike. Australian under-19 time trial and road race champion from a couple of years ago.
And quite an accomplished family.
They are good, very, very good. Sam Eddy, the older brother of the two. So Sam was second in that under-19 title that Pat won. Both riders now riding for the Bridge Lane team in the National Road Series. Both riders hoping and we're expecting to go to France this year to race for a couple of months. And we'll have to wait and see what goes on there with everything that's happening around the COVID world.
I think everybody's kind of sick of hearing about and talking about COVID, but it continues to play a real impact on what the riders are going to do for the rest of the season and when they may end up. And it changes the importance of some of the races too, where some races may ordinarily be just stepping stones to other big events. We've kind of lost the surety that the next event will actually be on. It's like every race is the last race. There's a lot more desperation. It's
made it great to watch as a spectator because the best teams, the A team comes out every time in terms of, say, the World Tour. Paris-Roubaix still, I haven't heard confirmation if it's on or not this weekend, so wait and see.
I'm too scared to refresh my feed on that one, Scott. I really want it to be on.
84 laps to go. One attack that picked up the first sprint. Moriarty then came back into the peloton, and it's all fairly leisurely at this point.
Fairly leisurely.
Fairly leisurely.
It's all relative.
And by the standards of these lads, the elite men, this is the points race, the final discipline within the four discipline Omnium event. So they've had the scratch race, tempo, elimination earlier tonight, and now it's this final points race. And a little bit more pace coming on. 82 laps to go when they come around. And starting to get ready. They need to start thinking about shuffling into the right position to get ready for this next of the sprints.
There's something about that Dutch skin suit that just makes Ryan Schilt look very profy, doesn't it? It's just a great setup altogether. They are coming around now for the Bell Lap. 81 laps to go.
Oliver Bledden it is from Western Australia. Powerfully built endurance rider as he goes down the back straights. Two riders from Victoria trying to come up around the outside of him though, but Bledden it is that comes into the finishing straight and just gets pipped actually. Didn't quite hold on. It was Jensen Plowright that came over to pick up the 5 points. So the overall leader goes from 116 to now 121 points. That was a handy point gain from Plowright. Here's Ryan Schilt on the attack straight away as well, Kate, sorry.
Well, this is a good move to go on the attack. It's when everybody's at their most vulnerable, because when you do sprint full tilt, you often do need to swing up and take a bit of a breath. If an attack goes at that exact time, it can be very tough. to then chase it. Plowright taking those points will extend his lead a little bit. It's very smart for him to just chip away and get some extra points without having to go too much on the offensive. This break doesn't look to be going anywhere, Scott. They've swung up the track, taken the speed off. Nobody really wants to take responsibility for the speed now. It's almost as though they're looking for easy wins. If they can attack and force that break without having to chip away at it for 10 laps, they'll do it. But when it's not working, they're swinging up. Let's try it again. Let's see if a different combination might be more fruitful.
Trying to sneak off the front is one way of putting it. Trying to sneak off the front. But in an arena where everyone's focusing on the track, pretty hard to do. Jensen Plowright it is. He's given himself a few extra points now. 121 is what he sits on. Walsh still on 114, having not featured in that last sprint. And he's now out in front with Josh Duffy. So the Tasmanian Josh Duffy is out there with him. Also, Declan Tresize. I mentioned him when his name came up earlier. Young man, rides for the ARA Sunshine Coast Racing Team. And he's pretty handy indeed. He won a lot of the under-19 titles back in December. He's only just come up into the elite category, but very handy from the under-19s, winning multiple national championships in these bunch races. He's good at this type of racing. But there has been a bit of pressure come on from the peloton. So the gap hasn't really opened up just yet.
A lot of the under-19 riders, when they step up, they do have quite different power profiles to the more mature riders. That gives them a little bit more of a dynamic edge sometimes in that ability. You can see it in a much more exaggerated form when they get older and a little bit slower. They come through now. 71 laps to go. The bell has been rung. This break will not stay away to get these points. Look at the speed of this march past Queensland and Victoria, fighting it out.
Liam Walsh it was that picked up the 5 points. So he saw Plowright pick up 5 points last time. He didn't get any that time, and then he's brought it back to the status quo. Liam Walsh comes through to pick up 5 points to get himself back close enough to be within striking distance of Jensen Plowright.
That was classy. That was really well done.
Very flashy, wasn't it? The three riders out in front, including Plowright, spent a couple of laps out in front. They weren't that willing to go so deep to try and accelerate for that sprint, and with a rush from behind, that allowed Liam Walsh to go straight round the outside. It was flashy, but how much did it hurt? That's what
well, Plowright also picked up a point there, so in effect he actually clawed a little bit back. So there's now a 3-point differential. It's still very tight. I mean, there's still absolutely that Plowright and Walsh will, to a degree, be mirroring each other.
Now that's Pat Eddy from Victoria that's pushing Walsh to the line. If you want to talk about team tactics, that's one of them as well. Now it may not have been what they were trying to do, but by Pat really going deep to make sure that Walsh had to go to a maximum to hold him off, that can play to the advantage of Pat Eddy's teammate, Jensen Plowright. Push Walsh deep so he gets really hurt and fatigued, so Plowright can take advantage of that later in the race.
Whether that was intentional or not, I'm not sure, but that was pretty advanced. That wasn't in the kind of points race for dummies kind of section. That one is definitely a very well coordinated outfit, but we can see the Victorian team in particular, they really seem to be going for the strength in numbers. We're seeing them ride and group together quite a lot, look after each other. They are definitely on a mission here to protect that lead of Plowright. There's a big gap back. Ryan Schilt, the rider in the distinctive orange there, he's actually sitting in third spot. He's got no help and no support. It will be a very big ask for him to try and get those points back. His best bet, I think, Scott, would be to sit mid-pack and just wait for the perfect opportunity to try and take a lap.
Declan Tresize it is, the Queenslander. He's been in one handy move for no real results in terms of points added. Josh Duffy, the Tasmanian. Now 62 laps to go. So Duffy, he's definitely in the mix. He sits in fourth place on 98 points and only 2 points behind that bronze medal of Ryan Schilt that you mentioned in the orange jersey. So Plowright 122, 3 points to the advantage of Walsh. Duffy doesn't look like he's going to go too deep for this one, but it's Plowright that's being dragged around in second position to maybe go for this particular sprint and pick up some points. Queensland as well up there as well. It's going to be a tight one, but it will be Plowright. Plowright just ahead of Walsh, so that's first and second in the overall classification, and another 2 points added, or as an advantage, over Walsh by Plowright. So Plowright will go to 127 points, and Liam Walsh, he'll go to 122. So 5 points is now the margin between Plowright and Walsh. So tactics again, lead out by the Victorians, looking after Plowright. Jensen's put himself definitely in the mix to try and win the gold medal here. And now in the last two sprints, the Victorian teammates have been out there just to do that little bit to help him out.
And Plowright looks quite comfortable to me in the sprints. He's not doing it easy, per se. He's still certainly having to push all the way to the line because Walsh isn't giving any freebies. But he looks quite controlled, and I think he has the confidence of, one, coming in leading and knowing that he's got pretty good legs, but also how well the Victorian team are supporting him. That does add a lot of confidence and a lot of comfort in what you know is a very tough event.
Tresize once again off the front. He's quite happy to go on the attack, the young Queensland rider, but he has taken Oliver Bledden with him. Now Bledden sits in 6th place overall on 81 points, so still a fair way behind the outright medals, but close enough to still be thinking very much of trying to get himself up into the bronze medal of Ryan Schilt. There's the orange jersey on the top of the track. That's the guy sitting in the virtual bronze medal position at the moment. Hasn't picked up any points in this particular race just yet, though. Well, very few, just biding his time. We're not quite at the halfway point yet, so still lots of points to come. And these two riders are almost half a lap up on the rear of the peloton. So this could be a very good move for Bledden in particular. Tresize is a little bit further down in 11th place on 66 points, but if they get a lap on the field, he'll go to 88 points. And Bledden, he'll go from 81 to 101 and move into the bronze medal spot.
Well, the other thing to consider is for all of the riders, regardless of where they are actually sitting in the overall standing, they're racers and they're out there to race. They're not going to sit back and let the race go away from them just for the sake of the overall. They'll still be looking for a result. They've gone through and gotten the bell. This breakaway here, Tresize and Bledden, it looks like Tresize leading from the front, but Bledden wants these points. If they do get the lap, he'll take the 20, but he'll take the 5 in the meantime and inch his way up that leaderboard.
So Bledden ahead of Tresize. And they're only racing for 1 point in the peloton. The speed did come on to try and chase that point. But what else has happened is we see Tresize out in front. Bledden has now sat up. So it's only the one rider out in front. You can see Declan wasn't sure either. He swung up to allow Bledden to come through and realised he wasn't there anymore. So Tresize out in front on his own. Bledden just coming into shot now. There he is, the Western Australian. So he's picked up 5 points and comes back into the field. He sits still in 6th place overall, so didn't even change his overall standings. But with the danger of that attack off the front, the blue colours of Victoria did come to the front in formation to start just getting the speed of the peloton going a little bit more. That was enough for Oliver Bledden to say, all right, fellas, I'll come back and join you.
Well, the 1-2 is a hot race between them, but sort of Tresize swings up. But the race is still on in absolute earnest for that bronze medal. Schilt sitting there on 100 points at the moment, but Josh Duffy, he's only 2 points adrift on 98. So a few races within a race, and they're getting to the pointy end. They're past the halfway mark. It's 100 laps and 25 kilometres. They'll come around with 45 laps left to run, so still a few before the positioning, before that sprint starts.
It really is sort of an A and a B grade, isn't it? You've got your two riders in Plowright and Walsh, 127 and 122 points, and a big gap back to Ryan Schilt on 100, Duffy on 98, and then Graham Frizzley a little bit further back in 5th place on 89 points. But it's a race for gold and it's a race for the bronze at the moment. Frizzley, a part of the Victorian team, So will he start thinking about chasing the bronze medal for himself, or perhaps continue helping Jensen, who is really in the hot seat to try and win the gold? 43 laps to go. Lots of sprints still to come. Double points again as a reminder for the final sprint. And Josh Duffy from Tasmania, the big Tasmanian. He's a fast sprinter. He sits in 4th place now, only 2 points behind Ryan Schilt in the orange colours. So the Tasmanian head-to-head against Ryan Schilt. If they stay that close, I'd be a little bit nervous if I was Ryan coming into that final sprint with the speed that Josh Duffy from Tasmania has. The bronze medal still very, very much to be ridden for. Next line time through, and it's another bell. Trezai's on the front, and it's Walsh in 2nd place, Plowright in 3rd. So there's your 2nd and 3rd in the overall, 2nd and 1st in the overall classification. Plowright the first one to go. Walsh was looking at him, but he just left it a little bit late. And Jensen Plowright, he's very fast on the road, and he can sprint pretty quick around the Velodrome as well. So there's another 5 points and another 2-point buffer to be added to the total. He'll go to 132 points. And Liam Walsh will go up to 125. So 7 points now is the lead.
He's just chipping away at that lead, isn't he? He's doing not a lot of damage to himself. He looks very controlled. It's quite a mature ride, I would say, from Plowright. He's definitely taking control. He's not sitting back and waiting and seeing what Walsh does and how he needs to react. He's actually making quite a proactive effort out there.
Strong group off the front as we just get the confirmation. Plowright, Walsh, Simpson and Pat Eddy in that last sprint. Pat Eddy is one of the 2 riders that's off the front now. So Moriarty and Eddy off the front. And Moriarty just went out of shot there, but Moriarty just starting to struggle a little bit on the rear wheel of Patrick Eddy. And the peloton easing up. The 2 riders in front are definitely at a half a lap up now. So Moriarty and Eddy, Queenslander and the Victorian, with a real opportunity. There's Patrick Eddy on the front. Medalled in the under-23 time trial at the National Championships on the road a couple of weeks ago. Has made the transition back across to the track just to see what it's like and whether he can have this as a pathway. And I really do think that he has the motor. He's got the engine to be a part of the national track program.
He had a good individual pursuit. He certainly came back out and showed that he does have it. Maybe it needs to be polished a little bit to get up to a slightly higher standard. But yeah, I do think that he's shown that he's got the goods in there. The Omnium, perhaps not his strongest event, but he has certainly got some events within the Omnium that are stronger and better performing for him than others.
Well, both these riders are a long way down in the overall standing, so there's no real pressure on the peloton to try and bring them back. But you can see now Pat Eddy has left Moriarty and is trying to get himself around to the back of the peloton, pick up 20 points. He's down in 14th place on 37 points, so it won't make any real difference in the overall standings. And while that's happened, though, Oliver Bledden has gone to the front of the peloton to really give it a bit of a nudge. So he's picked the pace up. And Eddy still fighting to try and get to the back of the peloton. 31 laps to go. He'll pick up the 5 points when he comes around after another lap and look over the shoulder just to see where Moriarty is. He's still a long way behind. No danger to Patrick Eddy for the 5 points on this sprint. And also looks as if he may be just looking to pick up these points and nothing more, because it's been a big effort to this point for Pat Eddy. Here's the 5 points for him. Moriarty with the 3 and a little bit of a scramble. Jensen Plowright pops over the top to pick up another 2 points. So he's been diligent, Plowright.
He's riding really smart. It's a very good ride from him, and quite a mature ride from him as well, I would say. You could almost look at what Eddy has done and think, well, what's the purpose of it? But again, they're bike races, and if they aren't in the overall for the Omnium, it doesn't mean they can't perform in individual events and certainly push themselves all the way to the end. They need to do that, I think, within the confines and respect of what's going on in the team atmosphere. But Jensen Plowright, anytime you have somebody in your team off the front, it takes responsibility off you to do any chasing. And so while it didn't elicit too much reaction from the peloton, it certainly takes any pressure further off Plowright. So a bit of a win-win there from those lads.
Well, the leader's margin is now 9 points. Jensen Plowright back to Liam Walsh from Queensland. So the Victorian doing a very good job indeed. And he's also another rider that didn't go away from the track, has always sort of kept in touch with it, but really has started to focus a lot more on the road because he's been doing so well in the National Road Series. He is the sprinter for the Bridge Lane team. And when it comes to a criterium, there's always one name on the lips of anyone in the domestic racing scene, Jensen Plowright. He is the one that they think is the favourite in those criteriums. We're seeing why now. He is a strong and very fast rider, and he has a 9-point lead over Liam Walsh. Ryan Schilt still sits on 100 points in third place, with Duffy on 98, 2 points behind. That has not changed now for several sprints.
No, so both of the riders have gotten to this point with a bit of gas left over, but I'm suggesting that quite a lot of fatigue has set in. Maybe they are just waiting for that final sprint. Schultz, what's he doing sitting on the front, pushing it too much? He doesn't need to. He's just swung off. I thought that he might sit back and attack later on in the race and see if he could possibly get those 20 points and therefore take a lap. But he may be actually just a bit tired, Scott, because he doesn't look to be making any move in that regard. 23 laps left. It's probably a bit too late in the game. Having said that, I've seen Cameron Meyer do it, take a flyer with 12 laps to go and actually gain a lap. He did that in 2012 when he won the points race in Melbourne. Yeah, the most exciting points race I've ever seen.
Yeah, but that's Cameron Meyer.
Yeah, that is true. So with all due respect to Ryan Schilt.
Here he comes. Here comes the man in orange. You mentioned it. He's coming around. It's 21 laps to go. This is the third last sprint. Ryan Schilt and Josh Duffy. We just talked them up wondering where they'd been for the last half a race, and here they are. They're popped up on the front, but look at the man coming from behind, Jensen Plowright. He wants the 5 points. He wants to win this Omnium, and he's doing everything he can to make sure he does that. Now, in second place was Schilt, so that will give him 103 points now, and an extra point gain over Josh Duffy, who was third.
But status quo remains. Plowright, Schilt, Duffy, they all remained in their spots overall, the first, third and fourth with that result. But what I like is that they are racing for those medals. They're not sitting back and just seeing what happens. They're actually very actively getting out there. So Josh Duffy will need to do something pretty special in the final sprint or two if he wants to step up into that bronze medal. Plowright has not an unassailable lead, but almost ahead of Liam Walsh.
So a nice 5 points it was. So 2 sprints to come, 15 points on offer. Still lap gains also a possibility, and that's what's happening now is Rowan Hayden-Smith from New South Wales out in front after that last sprint. He's gone on the attack and trying to get himself 20 points for gaining a lap. He also is a little bit down. He's in 7th place on 81 points. If he gains a lap, he moves up close to the bronze medal. He'll be in equal to 4th position, I think.
Close, but oh so far, Scott.
It is, and nowhere near gold or silver. So Plowright and Walsh don't need to be concerned about the New South Welshman off the front, and he is starting to slow down a little bit now, Kate. So there's a push from Victoria to just set these last couple of sprints up, neutralise any attacks to make sure that Jensen Plowright comes away with the overall win. And Liam Walsh from Queensland has to do something very spectacular now.
Well, he's given up the goat. He's swung up the track. He's not going on with that attack. He did drop his head a bit and start to look around. That's always a bit of a giveaway. That you've run out of legs. He will try and get on the back of the bunch. I hope he's able to do that. Otherwise, well, that's a pretty nasty way to exit the race. But a bit of a gap's opened up, so that's unfortunate for him. But look at the Queenslanders getting organised now, Scott. They know that coming into these final 2 sprints, if Walsh is to overcome Plowright, he needs a bit of help. And it looks like the Maroon squad has come in numbers to see if they can do that. But 3 Victorians on their wheel. I'm not sure about this.
Well, there are 2 other Queenslanders that are further down the field, so it's only the one rider that's been doing the lead out, and with a lap to go to this next sprint, it's 11 laps, and Walsh has had to go very, very early. This plays completely into the hands and the legs of Jensen Plowright. It'll be a bit of a fight down the finishing straight, But a lap to go, to have to lead out from there, that was always going to be really tough for Liam Walsh, and Plowright took advantage of that, came out of the slipstream, popped around to pick up the 5 points, and another 2-point buffer over the rider in silver, which is Liam Walsh. So Queensland trying to do something, but they've got 4 riders in the race. They've only used 2 to actually really help Walsh. If they really want to try and beat the Victorians and Jensen Plowright, they need to come with significant numbers in those situations.
I'm not sure they've got the legs, to be honest. I think now Liam Walsh, on a points basis, it's not possible for him to actually win. So that is done and dusted, essentially, with one sprint left to go. What does still remain open is that bronze medal. Schilt on 101 points, but Duffy on 98. So that is still open. On the odd chance that Graham Frizzley won the sprint and Josh Duffy didn't get any points, or Ryan Schilt, he'd move up to 4th. But it is Duffy and Schilt that are looking to fight it out for that bronze medal. So they might be the 2 that we keep an eye on here.
So it's 6 laps to go now in the final discipline within the Australian Championships Elite Men's Omnium race. And as it stands, Jensen Plowright has worked diligently throughout this race to give himself now an 11-point buffer coming into the final sprint. Double points on offer, only 10 is the maximum. So he is unbeatable coming into this final sprint. And if he crashes now or has a mechanical mishap,
well,
if he gets into the last kilometre, it doesn't matter. So now we're coming around to get 4 laps to go, 1 kilometre to go. Doesn't matter what happens now, he will be given the victory, Jensen Plowright. But the race we need to start really focusing on, as you mentioned, Kate, was Ryan Schilt in the orange colours up against Josh Duffy from Tasmania. There is still a medal on offer, and it's the bronze. And it's orange versus the green of Tassie, Schilt versus Duffy. That's what we'll focus on this one. I think Plowright still wants to come away with the final sprint win as well, just to prove how good he is. But I'm really interested to see what goes down between Schilt and Duffy for bronze.
Well, Plowright looking pretty dominant. I actually think Josh Duffy might be a bit cooked. He's got a big gap that's opening up in front of he, and I think it's Moriarty. They've got 2 laps to go now. Duffy's got a lot of room to move up. He's not going to be able to do it. Schilt is on the move. I think he'll get the points here, Scott.
Coming around for the last lap now, and Ryan Schilt, he wants that bronze medal. He was pretty non-existent. He was very quiet throughout the race, kept himself in contention for the medals, and absolutely is motoring around for this final sprint. So Ryan Schilt guarantees that he comes away with the bronze. But it's Jensen Plowright that gets the gold. It was a fantastic performance from him with a little bit of help from his friends, but that's racing. And Jensen Plowright wins the overall Omnium for the elite men at the AusCycling Track National Championships ahead of Liam Walsh, with Ryan Schilt flashing home in orange to come away with the bronze medal. So there's your gold medal winner, Jensen Plowright. He's super fast on the track, and not only is he fast, he's also strong, which is really good to see. These sprinters from the road and the criterium riders, they really are strong when they are pushed to go as hard as they can, and that's what Jensen Plowright was able to do. Comes away with a gold medal. A happy Victorian.
Quite a formidable combination, isn't it, when you've got both of those attributes. The Victorian team raced really well together. They raced not as such a dedicated squad that it made it boring and they didn't neutralise it. Plowright did have to look after himself, certainly for the first 2/3 of that race. But the Victorians did a very good job of supporting each other without shutting all of their other opportunities out. So I like to see that. Schilt, great show of energy at the end. I tend to think, where was that with 30 laps to go, to try and take a lap and see what happens.
I think he had one effort in him and he used it.
Yeah, he was defending that bronze medal, and good on him. I mean, it's easy for us to sit up here and pontificate over how his legs might feel, but look at this camaraderie. It's great. Good racing between the boys, and they're obviously mates, and more than that, a lot of respect between them, which we like to see.
Good, clean racing. There was no infringements, no biffo. It was clean, straight racing. Best man wins, and Jensen Plowright certainly was that. And a good ride, though, from Liam Walsh. Ryan Schilt in 3rd place. But happy to see the next generation of riders coming up, and Jensen Plowright certainly has been the name on the lips of several riders over the last couple of seasons. And look at him go. He was so strong throughout the race. And again, we talk about just doing enough without overextending. He did that several times. This is another one where Pat Eddy really pushed Liam Walsh to go very, very deep to hurt the Queenslander. That was also to the advantage of Plowright.
It was a bit cheeky, but it was very, very smart. And in every time you saw Plowright, you also saw another Victorian just quietly there in the shadows supporting him. So I really like how they worked as a team. I think they went in with a very robust strategy and they executed it pretty perfectly. Notwithstanding that, I think that absent of any such strategic execution, I think that Plowright still would have won. He was the strongest out there. But having that support often adds a lot to the feeling of confidence and even camaraderie amongst them. So well fought, and also to the Queensland team for supporting Liam Walsh. I think they all did quite a good job. So we'll have some presentations coming up, Scott.
That's where they'll be standing very shortly. Just wrapping up, Jensen Plowright wins the men's Omnium on 139 points ahead of Liam Walsh on 128. Ryan Schild, after winning the final sprint, holds on to the bronze medal on 111 points. The presentations and more racing will all be coming up very soon.
Come and discover the epic wonders, the friendly faces, and incredible new adventures that will change you and the way you see the world. Right here in Queensland.
It seems an age since I seen you. Countdown as the weeks trickle into days. I hope that time hasn't changed you. My happiness is slowly creeping back. Now you're at home.
The Meares Velodrome, just out in the suburb of Chandler here in Brisbane, just next door to the old Commonwealth Games velodrome that was built for the 82 Com Games. The track here, built for the 2018 Com Games. Brisbane certainly is a fantastic city, vibrant along the river. Absolutely fantastic, amazing. And we just saw some great racing. The next presentation that will be coming up is the Under-19 men's points race. So we'll get to see the next generation of Rogers family from the ACT come up to collect a gold medal. There's Nick Formosa, looks after the Queensland Academy of Sport Riders. And all the riders in the infield starting to get ready for the next races. The elite women's points race is coming up as well. Kate Bates is certainly very keen to look at that one, see how that race has evolved itself since she won the World Championships in 2007. And just recapping some of the racing that we've already seen. This is the Under-19 points race. Mitchell Yard on the yellow bike. You see there, he's the rider that unfortunately was involved in that incident. We've had confirmation now that when we see them come up for the presentations, Cameron Rogers was indeed the winner. Mitchell Yard won the final sprint, gave him the 10 points, but before he did that, this is what happened. And the 10 points for the final sprint put him into the silver medal position, but unfortunately he was relegated for that infringement. So that means it's the bronze medal for Mitchell Yard from Queensland. And while he didn't get to the end of the race on the bike because it was broken, Jackson Hribar from Victoria does come away with the silver. So perhaps a sigh of relief for young Jackson, watching on the final sprint from the sidelines. But there was no doubt in the winner overall. Cameron Rogers was very consistent, very strong, and had a 14-point buffer at the end after 100 laps, 25 kilometres. So the next generation of Rogers family coming out of Canberra, and another superstar in the making, Cameron Rogers.
Always great to see them pull on the green and gold.
Already patched up a little bit there. You can see Mitchell Yard, so very quick to put the tape on. And I'm sure there'd be some disappointment for Mitchell Yard from Queensland. You know, unintentional. He was just desperate to get down the track, and unfortunately the front wheel of Jackson was in the way, so he decided to take it with him.
Definitely unintentional. And to be honest, I'm not sure I agree with the outcome of it, but that's what there are judges for, so that they can come to the conclusion that everybody thinks is the most fair outcome for them. That's gear shop, but in the back there with a bit of a demonstration.
Well, I think there were two scenarios that they had to work with, and that was disqualification because of the infringement, which means no result at all, or relegation from the next sprint. But it was 8 laps to go. That's the controversial part, is I guess they've taken the lesser of the two penalties so that he still gets a result, but that lesser penalty means that he was penalised for infringing the final sprint 8 laps before the sprint itself.
Yeah, again, I'm not entirely convinced with the outcome, but I do understand why they did that. The presentation here now for the men's Omnium. We just watched the points race after having watched the elimination earlier on. Jensen Plowright, what an incredible ride from him. It was Liam Walsh just getting his silver medal there. Ryan Schilt in those colours of the Netherlands, getting that bronze medal.
He rides for the Olympia Amsterdam cycling team, but Ryan has spent a lot of time based out of Melbourne. And we see several riders now. We saw Shane Perkins in the team sprint riding for Russia. There's Connor Rowley that's also riding for Ireland now, a Victorian sprinter with Irish heritage. Shannon McCurley, likewise, is another rider from
Their names give it
Victoria.
away, that heritage.
But Jensen Plowright was the best in the Elite Men's Omnium Series. Really consistent, as you must be throughout the Omniums. Just at the bottom of the picture there, we can see Michelle Ferris with the glasses up on her head, just bobbing down as I mentioned her. Yeah, we saw this morning the under-19 women's 200-metre flying qualifying for their sprint competition. And Alessia McCaig went on to win the under-19 sprint, and she broke her own national record this morning that she broke last month at the state championships. Now that record that she broke last month was Michelle Ferris's record that stood for something like 27 years. So it shows the talent that Michelle Ferris, the two-time Olympic silver medalist, had back in the day to hold on to that under-19 national record for something like 27 years until Alessia McCaig came along last month.
Well, it's a bit of a comparison. Anna Meares sprinted in a 12.4 for a flying 200 at the same age as Alessia McCaig is riding an 11.1. So that's pretty mind-boggling. Anna herself, in fact, thinks it's just incredible how fast this young lady is going. So I think that that's a name everybody should get used to hearing. And you know what I loved? When she crossed the finish line, Scott, she actually popped her arms up in the air and looked directly at the photographer like, I'm here for business. You better get used to taking photos of me. It was very classy. Bit of pizzazz.
The McCaig family out of Bendigo, famous in that region. The Bendigo Madison was established by her grandfather, Alan McCaig, and then Alan's brother Frank then took over a couple of years later, and they still run that event. Unfortunately not this year because of the COVID situation. It was cancelled, but hopefully it will be back for next year.
So what you're saying is when she said, Daddy, I'd like to do ballet, he said, here's a bike. And when she said, Daddy, I'd like to try softball, he said, that's nice, here's a bike.
No, she's actually done multiple sports. And even up until last year, while she was winning national championships, and in the under-17 category, absolutely, she was doing several other sports at the same time. Cycling was just one of the sports she was doing. But now that, I think they were really good as parents in allowing her, they had the resources to be able to allow her to just try a few different sports and see what she really wanted to do. And it just happened to be cycling. And I'm sure they were very happy about that, being a cycling family.
Yep, how convenient.
But keep an eye on, you say look out for her name. I think it won't be that long. Next year is the Commonwealth Games, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see Alessia McCaig in the first year as an elite. perhaps riding for Australia next year. We'll wait and see. But we're on to the men's team sprints. This is the race for the bronze medal, and it's the Australian Capital Territory up against Western Australia. 2 riders from the national team for the Tokyo Olympic Games in these races. Richardson riding for Western Australia and Nathan Hart for the ACT. So bragging rights on offer as well by the teammates in our national team. Not just medals. There's a bronze medal up for grabs, but I'm sure there'll be
bragging rights go a fair way, you reckon, Scott?
Absolutely. ACT in the home straight as the faster of the 2 teams in qualifying. Western Australia in the back straight. And a big effort by all of the riders. It's Nathan Hart in 3rd position for ACT. So Green pushing them down the back straight. And we'll wait till they come around after the completion of the first lap and each of their first riders pull up out of the track. And ACT got to the line first, but there was a big gap back to their second rider. So still very close indeed. Western Australia now really moving ahead, and that's because of Matthew Richardson. Matthew Richardson really did a big second turn for Western Australia, so Nathan Hart has to do something very special if he wants to bring the ACT back into it. It's a long gap back to the ACT, and I think Western Australia are riding themselves into bronze, and indeed they are. So slower than the ACT in the qualifying, but they've come through to win the bronze medal, so that's the way to do it. Back it up, go faster in the next round when the medals are at stake.
Yeah, that was a very good ride by the crew from over west. I feel like they're just really pleased to get out of Western Australia for a little while. They might be a bit nervous about trying to get back in, to be honest.
It's a lovely place over there, but why would you want to leave?
Well, that is very true.
No, it's been tough, hasn't it, for them?
It has, I think.
It's been safe. They've had the opportunity to make it safe by having that real state solid border, but they like to travel, these guys.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount of choosing not to leave because you're happy in your training environment to not go anywhere versus not knowing if you can even set goals and push toward them because you're not sure if you'll even be allowed to travel for them or then travel back. So I think mentally the Western Australian team as a whole have done it pretty tough. So I think we need to give them a bit of recognition for that. But now, Scott, we're looking at the ride for the gold medal. A bit of conjecture earlier on between us about which team maybe looked a little bit fresher than the other. We suggested that perhaps New South Wales may have gotten through that first round with slightly fresher legs than the South Australian team.
They looked smooth. They just looked as a unit. They just looked a little bit more polished, if you will. Just for the interest of everyone, 3rd place, 44.9 for Western Australia, was over half a second quicker than they did in qualifying. So a great improvement for WA to come away with the bronze medal and a very quick time indeed. Now it's New South Wales versus South Australia. And Matthew Glaetzer on the right-hand side there. The elbows tucked in, super powerful, very fast, but he's only doing the first lap. That's not a massive advantage for South Australia as they get underway. It'll be a quick first lap, but it'll be the 2 non-national team members that'll have to bring it home. For New South Wales, it'll be Tom Cornish, the Australian kilometre time trial champion, who is amazingly fast over a long distance. He will be the final rider for New South Wales. So New South Wales with a little bit of work to do. Glaetzer got South Australia up and going. Now the race really starts with New South trying to bring things back, but South Australia with an incredible advantage now. Cornish takes over for New South. He's in unfamiliar territory with a lot of work to do, but he is fast enough perhaps to bring it back. South Australia versus New South Wales. Cornish is coming, and he has arrived.
Boy, oh boy, was that not a comeback or what? Tom Cornish, that was phenomenal. I think a very big ride from Charismo, but he knew he was going to do it tough. With such a blistering start from Glaetzer, it is just so difficult to hold that speed. But Tom Cornish, what a ride. What a way to show those national team selectors that he's a pretty good option. Look at me, Tom Cornish. What a sensational performance, 44.697. A little bit faster, marginally faster than what they did in the qualifying, but the fastest that we have seen on the track tonight.
if you took a photo at 1 lap to go and saw the margin that Cornish had to overcome,
Even half a lap, Scott.
I'd say no way. It's
No
over.
way.
It's done. South Australia's going to win, but Cornish, he rode 59.5 in the kilometre time trial
Yikes.
the other day. Super, super fast to go under 1 minute. Of incredible fast from a standing start. And wow, what a deficit to overcome. Tom Cornish, that was blisteringly fast, and all of the national team and national squad members in different positions throughout their state squads where they lined up. That made that very intriguing. Take nothing away, though, from New South Wales. They had a bit of work to do, and Cornish finished it off for them. Gold to New South Wales, silver to South Australia, and the bronze medal going to Western Australia in what you would say was an upset in the last race. WA coming in the slower of the 4 teams, but still doing enough to come away with the bronze medal. And look at this. This is the deficit. That's 1 lap to go. Oh, that's half a lap to go there. And Cornish, still so much work to do. Bit of extra pressure in the legs for Charismo, having to just try and hold the wheel of Glaetzer when he went from the start, because he's such a powerful man as well.
I think you coined the phrase last night, Scott. Very technical one. Ouchie wouchie,
Ouchie
I
wouchie.
believe it was.
Yes.
That's how I feel about
I went back to my old coaching.
Charismo's legs.
I went back
He's
to my old
feeling a bit
coaching manual. It
ouchie
comes up.
wouchie. Is that in the coaching for dummies?
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's a non-technical term, that one.
I think I might have written it in under one of the more ridiculous training sessions I had. What sort of session's that one? That's the ouchie wouchie one. I try not to do it so much. He's on good form, Cornish, and he has been trying to force his way into the 3-man team for Australia for Tokyo. At the moment, he sits at number 4, but that was a great comeback win to get gold in the men's team sprint. Now, you can't see her on camera, but Kate Bates is now up, standing out of her chair, because it's the elite women's scratch race that's come out onto the track.
Just warming my legs up,
Oh, it's
Scott. I've
points
got to
race,
get
I should
ready
say.
for the points race.
Yeah, I said scratch race. It's the points race, and Kate's all excited about it.
Oh, look, we've got to get excited about something, Scott. We've had some pretty great racing out here tonight. And to finish it off with the women's points race, well, what can I say? I
Cream
love
of the crop. Cream of the crop. come
Cream
out.
of the crop.
This is the last race of the night. We'll have the presentations for the team sprint and also the women's points race at the end of it all. But this is the last race that we'll see here tonight at the Meares Velodrome. And it's going to be very interesting. Now, to note, little thing to point out is that we don't have, say, the national team pursuit team riders for Tokyo here. They're on a heavy training block focusing on the Tokyo Olympic Games. You can imagine the difficulty of rescheduling the training for all of these riders, considering the delays that we've had with the Olympic Games. So they're on a different schedule, but that creates an opportunity for some of these other riders to step up and win a national title. So this is going to be very interesting.
I'm a little bit intimidated on paper with this team from South Australia. They've got 4 riders out there. They've had a sensational week. They did win the team's pursuit on Wednesday in Australian Championship time, 4:24. Impressive ride by them, and we saw them again in action last night in the individual pursuit. They've got Pate, Chung, Moran and Edwards. Certainly the strongest team on paper. Emily Watt, she is a sensational rider, under 23 road champion from New South Wales, but she's out there solo, so she will have to be very smart in how she approaches this. Alex Martin-Wallace, the Queenslander, Scott. She's someone that I would be eagle-eyed about if I was one of the other competitors. She's got a very big turn of speed, a very well-performing junior, and she knows this track like the back of her hand.
Former under-19 champion, Alex Martin-Wallace, and she spent the last couple of seasons based out of Adelaide with that national training program. And watched her in the individual pursuit the other day. Time wasn't outstanding by her standards, so I'm waiting to see just how she performs. She's very skillful in these bunch races.
She is. She's really savvy. She just knows the right wheels to choose, and she's very good with timing her sprints at the end as well. I've said it so many times, talking about the efficiency of how they race. That's Martin Wallace on the front now, the Queenslander, in the maroon colours. Yeah, so if they can ride efficiently, and Martin Wallace is one who is very efficient in her style and in her strategy, it goes really a long way. There's many points races that these riders will lose not because they don't have the legs, but because they just don't execute to a really good plan. So we're just rolling around at this point. 95 laps left to go. Sprint every 10 laps. Scott, 25 kilometres, double points on the final sprint. It's a pretty pure event.
20 points if you gain a lap. You lose 20 points if you lose a lap. Sounds pretty simple.
Until you're trying to do the maths out there, and then it feels like you've got a 47-row Excel spreadsheet going on in your head.
Well, for those of you that are watching and listening that are fairly new to cycling and track cycling, those rules we spoke about with 20 points gained if you take a lap, that is the new rules and regulations, perhaps in the last decade or so. I'm not sure what year they brought it in, but prior to that, if you gained a lap on the field, you were deemed on distance a lap ahead and then leading. And they decided to take that away, so it was somewhat, they thought, easier for the spectators to just see who has the most points at the end becomes the winner, rather than the rider that might be on 5 points.
No, mine was a lap ahead kind of...
I like it because it's different tactics too.
Oh, I like it too. I think it just gives a little bit more prestige as well to the fact that you've taken a lap. And it really differentiates between the riders who have gained their points by sprinting versus lap. And I like that, the post-analysis of how they actually gained all those points.
First sprint coming up now, every 10 laps. We've seen a couple of these races tonight over the last couple of days. Sprint every 10, and here's the first one. It's the South Australians. Alexandra Martin-Wallace from Queensland just boxed in a little bit as they go down the back straight, trying to get out and make some room. Chloe Moran, it is from South Australia, though, that's got the fresh legs for the first sprint. And Martin Wallace trying to get up for second, but I think just popped across the line in third. So Chloe Moran picks up the first of the sprints and keeps a little bit of pressure on as well. Another one of these very well-trained South Australians from the team pursuit program. She won the gold medal in the team pursuit the other day and led the sprint out, went for it, won it, and then kept a bit of pressure on. That shows a bit of form.
It does, yeah, it shows a bit of tenacity too, doesn't it? There's a very good attack going here now. I love a good attack from the top of the track to get the speed, because this is going to be effective. She's actually looking over her shoulder as if to say, is somebody going to come with me and keep me company? That's Sam de Ritter. She had a sensational individual pursuit. I would not be letting her leave the island, Scott. When you know that somebody is in great individual pursuit form and they move, you move too.
Smart from her as well, because she got the bit of a gap there and then looked over her shoulder and thought, well, hang on, we've opened up a gap to the peloton. We've got two riders here, and backed off a little bit. In a little bit of danger, though, if the pressure comes on back in the peloton as to whether it closes down. But because there's a South Australian out in front in this trio, the South Australians were on the front of the peloton, not chasing. So that's allowed this gap to continue to open, even though they weren't really putting pressure on that last lap. Now Sam's come back onto the front to squeeze the accelerator a little bit more and open it up.
Well, Lauren Perry was having to take responsibility for the chase back in the bunch, but she is a solid Tasmanian rider. She's very classy and savvy. She's been around for quite a number of years and learnt to race. But a lot of the time that Lauren Perry was racing in earlier years, she had the likes of Macy Stewart, Amy Cure, even Belinda Goss, to learn how to race from, and now she finds herself out there alone. So it's a very different dynamic and a very different way to race. This is not coming back anytime soon, Scott. I really can't see this break being reeled in at all, because the only people to chase are Lauren Perry and Emily Watts, really. And Lauren Perry can't justify doing it all on her own, because if a counter then goes, she's toast. Missing this break has taken away all opportunity from both her and Emily Watts for now. Of course, they can attack later in the race and get that 20 points and get that back. But this changes the dynamic, because once they get that lap and they get those 20 points, they can now ride defensively. The others have to ride quite offensively, and they are very, very different strategies in a points race.
Emily Watts just trying to get a little bit of pressure out of the peloton now as well. So 3 riders out in front, 3 different states represented. So there's 3 lots of teammates that are happy to do nothing back in the peloton, and that has allowed this gap to open right up as we go into the second of the sprints. And it's Martin Wallace leads down the back straight. Moran in second position. She won the first sprint, and at the moment there's no movement for that sprint going for the 5 points. And Martin Wallace did come across the line to pick up the 5 points. The peloton, they're racing for 1 point, picking up the scraps. It really won't play much of a role because the 3 riders now are at half a lap ahead. And Emily Watts may have just picked up that 1 point there for New South Wales.
But then they ease off the chase straight away, swinging off the track. Emily Watts can't be expected to sprint and chase and do it all. If anything, she and Lauren Perry, the Tasmanian, who's again back on the front, need to do the lion's share of the work. And they are, I might add, that between Perry and Watts, they've done most of the chasing there. This break actually isn't opening up much further than about half a lap, but it is really wearing at both Watts and Perry in particular.
Well, they just
so
last lap,
still
Kate,
dangerous.
Last lap, they all 3 of them swung up the track for a moment and then came back down again. So they're not really fully committed, and that's why the peloton's not chasing, but they're not absolutely committed out in front. So it looks like Sam de Ruyter is the one that wants to keep pushing. And now Chloe Moran goes through. De Ruyter again. So the individual pursuit champion of Australia from yesterday did a great time to win that title. She's happy to be out there and to push forward. Alex Martin Wallace in second place. Chloe Moran in third. But they're not absolutely fully committed. And the gap is still hovering at around half a lap.
Scott, I do not understand why they're not fully committing. Because this chasing bunch is going on and off from being beautifully organised, like we're currently seeing with Lauren Perry, to an absolute dog's breakfast where they're all looking at each other and swinging up the track. This is the opportunity for these 3 riders, and they've spent a lot of energy being out there. It is an absolute like a false thinking that you can get half a lap, 3/4 of a lap in front, but do it easy. Think, oh, just sit in, it won't waste too much energy. It hurts your legs so very much doing a 3-up teams pursuit for, what 70 laps are they thinking they can do this for? This is frustrating. It's frustrating me watching this. They need to commit, or they need to just swing up and stop wasting energy.
Still sitting out there around half a lap ahead. Chloe Moran does lead the way. She's won the first 2 sprints on 10 points. Alexandra Martin Wallace, she has 5 points second. Sophie Edwards, who's back in the peloton, she's third on 3 points. Sam de Ruyter, who is out in that breakaway group, she sits at 4th on 2 points. And they will be able to pick up the next sprint, still sitting around at half a lap. So both groups going at the same speed as they come down to get 72 laps to go. So the next sprint only a lap away. It will be contested between these 3 riders on screen. Martin Wallace from Queensland, looking across the track to see where the peloton is. Moran from South Australia in second place. De Ruyter from Victoria. And this is the peloton. 1 lap to go now. Martin Wallace on the front. Moran, who is the race leader at the moment on 10 points, in the perfect position. Second spot now. Doesn't have to lead this sprint out. She is quite fast as well, as is Martin Wallace. But they've been out there for a few laps now. And what's Chloe going to do? Allow Martin Wallace to pick up the 5 points? It looks as if she's going to. So Martin Wallace, 5 points.
Good riding.
Bit of cohesion to keep them working together and not fight too much for those small points, because there's still the big points of 20 to be gained. Lauren Perry comes through to pick up 1 point from the peloton. That's going to be tough later on. If you can only pick up 1 point at a time, you're going to be a long way down if they leave these 3 riders out for too much longer.
I feel as though Perry and Watts need to give it a crack to try and jump across to this, because they are just chipping away at the energy by doing that, by doing the lion's share of the chase. Chloe Moran at the front of this break now, pushing the pace but looking over her shoulder quite longingly actually. Are you coming through? Are you going to continue to work with me? Sometimes the breaks like this with 3 riders who you would think individually, like, what a sensational break, they often don't work that well together because there's a slight equaliser across the board where none of them are too confident that they'll be able to pip the other one should they get fatigued. But I do feel like they're doing this really the hard way. This could bite them very badly in the back end if they do get brought back in. I'm not sure they'll have a lot of energy left to sprint. So this is a bit of a strange one, Scott. This is quite an atypical points race where they're still within that half a lap up, and it's just not opening, it's not closing.
Well, they were only one big acceleration from the peloton away from being caught, because it's come back inside half a lap now. Chloe Moran is the race leader on 13 points. Martin Wallace on 10, sits in second place. Now Sam de Ruyter, after that last sprint, moves up to third, but only on 4 points. So she hasn't picked up too many, even though she's been out there now for a while. They've only had that one sprint since the attack happened. And the peloton's starting to have a couple of little gaps in there as well. So even at this pace, they really have started to fatigue a little bit. 64 laps to go. The breakaway group will come around to get 63. And Sam de Ruyter again really pushing the front of the breakaway. The peloton is a little bit more strung out, but it's just still this balancing act between the breakaway and the peloton. Another sprint not too far away though.
Well, Sam de Ruyter essentially has the most to lose by this, because she hasn't accrued a lot of points out there. So if they do get caught, she can very easily get absorbed off the podium by either Watts or Perry, who appear to be in pretty good form. Frustrating for them to be solo, but in saying that, they completely missed the move, and you've got to keep your eyes open and be very aware and attent.
So the next sprint, Lauren Perry looking over her shoulder. She's only racing for 1 point yet. Again, she picked that up last time, but gee, you want a few more than that. And Chloe Moran, she's going to. She's chasing 5 points now as they come around. Sam de Ruyter just up onto the back wheel of Chloe Moran. Is she going to come over the top? She will. So there's 5 points. The last sprint, and you can see the look there from Chloe Moran. She looked across at Sam to sort of say, well, hang on, I thought we were going to share these sprints and keep working well together. That's not the case. Sam wanted the 5. She needed them too, because she's a little bit further down.
Well, that could be the death knell on the break. They are now significantly closer. Emily Watts really pushing the pace here, the New South Wales rider on the front. Again, she is the under-23 National Road Race Champion. She can go long. We don't need to worry about her burning out too quickly, but we know now that there's tension in this front group. It's never come so close. The march is on from Emily Watts coming from the back. This front group, I think it might be all over, Scott. If not in the next lap, possibly the lap after that. That's it. They've swung up. The break is over. Moran is in a pretty commanding position overall, but Sam de Ruyter is probably the one I worry about the most in terms of overall point tally. Those 3 riders will be pretty toast, pretty cooked. Straight on the move from South Australia.
Amber Pate. She was good in the individual pursuit, and Amber Pate has gone whack over the top. Perfect moment to go as the breakaway was reabsorbed. I did say it was perhaps only one big acceleration from the peloton and they would come back. That's what happened. And they weren't fully committed. They got over half a lap, only a couple of laps ago, and then wasted an opportunity to try and gain 20 points each. So they're back in there now, and it's one rider off the front with Amber Pate from South Australia taking over from her teammate Chloe Moran, who is leading the overall. So 16 points, Chloe Moran leads ahead of Martin Wallace on 12. Sam de Ruyter on 9 points now. So she's closed the gap to silver. And still Chloe Moran, though, with a bit of a lead. Sophie Edwards from South Australia sits in 4th, equal points with Lauren Perry, who's been picking up those scraps back in the peloton. She needs a big 5-pointer now, but the next sprint's only 4 laps away. And Amber Pate, I don't think she can be beaten for this sprint. From this gap that she has now, it's quite extraordinary. And I tell you what, we talk about the next sprint. She's not far from getting to the back of the peloton. She's looked across the track then and realised how close she is to the peloton. There could be 20 points coming her way.
That is a cracking attack from Pate. That is exactly how you do it. You've really whacked them with a lot of speed so that even if they see you out of the corner of their eye, chasing and responding is a whole different thing. Timing spot on. Amber Pate in 8 laps will do what that 3 group of riders was unable to do in a 30-lap period. Pretty good riding. And the South Australians, well, they are more than sitting on the top of the table.
Well, Pate takes a lap on the field. That's 20 points for her, and it was just before the bell. So the sprint will be contested by the front of this peloton. So Pate comes through. She gets her 20 points anyway. And then the peloton itself will pick up the scraps. So that was an extraordinary performance, wasn't it? The peloton just eased off for a long, and she's strong. We saw her in the individual pursuit, and she was good at road nats as well in the time trial. So she is a strong rider. That's the way to do it. If you can, if the peloton lets you do it, that's great.
Yeah. I mean, there is an element, isn't there, of letting them do it versus just too strong. All about the timing for Amber Pate. Between Pate and Moran, the South Australian team are really here to do business, and they're just executing the plan perfectly. Emily Watts, she's got good legs. If she is able to time it right for an attack, I think that she could be in a very good position to take a lap. Lauren Perry, I think she's probably more likely to tap away at earning points throughout those sprints and make her way toward the podium in that regard. But at the moment, the South Australians certainly have the advantage.
It's 47 laps to go. This is the elite women's points race here at the AusCycling Track National Championships. And it would have been risky, but Amber Pate was so close to just backing off slightly to get the bell and then pick up that last sprint herself, get the 5 points, then come into the peloton. It's risky because if she didn't really have the legs, she may not have got back on and not gained the lap itself. So perhaps smarter just to accelerate right into the back of the group, pick up the 20 points. She now leads, and second place is Chloe Moran on 17 points. So one big effort from Amber Pate puts her straight to the top of the leaderboard. Alexandra Martin-Wallace still sits in third place on 12 points now. So 5 points between second and third, and 3 points between the gold and silver medal positions at the moment. But they are both South Australians, so it'll be interesting to see tactically how they play out the next few laps, and we'll see what happens. Chloe Moran certainly looks very good in the sprints, Kate, but Amber Pate, wow, that was strong. She might want to go for another lap later.
Well, I think Amber Pate would have fresher legs being able to achieve that within a 10-lap period, whereas Moran had to sprint 4 different times in order to get her points. She was in a breakaway, doing a lot of the work, taking a lot of the responsibility for 30 laps. Is this Emily Watts'
She got
time
balked
to
then.
move? She did a bit, didn't
balked.
she?
She went to go. She was out of the saddle to sprint, and then they all sort of swung up in front of her. And
the young New South Wales rider. She's got a lot of talent. She's got pretty good just kind of diesel ability once she gets up and going, because she's also a very good climber, but she's pretty dynamic on the track. So if the situation suits her, she's definitely in a... Oh, we've got a bit of a touch of wheels there. And Isla Carr goes down. Hopefully she'll be able to jump back up and she'll be okay. The first fall we've seen in this race so far, which is of small relief, but they get the bell. Scott, South Australia at the front again.
41 laps to go it is. South Australia in control. Lauren Perry giving a little bit of distance, showing some good racecraft as she goes down the back straight. Lauren Perry, just to give a little bit of a gap so she can run into the wheel and try and come up around the outside and pick up the 5 points. She won't get there though. Sophie Edwards was strong enough, also a crafty rider. So 5 points to another South Australian, not the ones we've been focusing on. Edwards now picks up 5. She had some points. She had 3 points already, so she'll go to 8. Lauren Perry, 3 points for her, and she's looking... These are good signs from Perry. She's out there on her own riding for Tasmania. Big, strong squads from the other states. But to push hard after that sprint just shows that she does have some good form, doesn't she?
Yeah, she's pretty savvy too. She knows how to read a bunch race, and she's a bit more experienced than a lot of them. Emily Watts, here she is. She needed to do this. The young New South Wales rider from Bathurst. She hasn't opened up an immediate gap like Amber Pate did, and in fact it's Amber Pate who is on the charge to chase her there. But if Emily Watts can keep going with this, she can move her way onto the podium, and we know that a formidable bunch buddy would be Amber Pate there. If these pair can continue this won't come back. The South Australians, look at that, they're kind of slowing the chasing bunch too, Scott. This is great news for Emily Watts, even better news for Amber Pate, who's currently leading. Puts the responsibility back on Alex Martin-Wallace, who has taken up the chase, but it will be a lonely chase.
Big move from Emily Watts, and very good move from Amber Pate to go straight onto it. Now, we saw from Emily Watts that she was trying to go on the attack a few laps ago, got a little bit balked. Now, she's come back from a broken neck only a couple of seasons ago, so I'm not surprised she was balked in that moment and backed out. Took the opportunity to go again, and Pate does look like she's happy to work with her. The pressure has now gone on to Queensland. Lauren Perry, as an individual out there, also is going to have to dig deep to try and neutralise this one. But it is a big push now. This is McLennan from Queensland closing the gap down. Lauren Perry had to swing up from 4th position, second wheel in the peloton. So Perry starting to show signs of fatigue now as well, and the race is split all over the place. Another opportunity for an attack, and it's Sam de Ruyter that has gone straight over the top of that last move.
Well, we might see a bit of a problem there, Scott, because Liliana McClellan clearly did a job for the team there, but she's actually a lap down already, so that is against regulation. I hope that Martin Wallace doesn't end up suffering for that, but it certainly does affect the outcome of the race. I don't love seeing that, I've got to say. I think she was trying to be loyal and do what she felt was right, but possibly not exactly as we'd like to see it. They're coming around for the bell. The front two have changed, Scott. It's now South Australia and Victoria.
31 laps to go it is. Another 5 points on offer. 2 riders out in front. It was hard to get out there. Now it's going to be a 2-up sprint between them. It's a big gap back to the Lauren Perry. She's leading the peloton. A bit of a mask on the face. Look over the shoulder. She'll be sprinting for 2 points. But out in front, Edwards jumps over the top of Sam de Ruyter. So 5 points to Edwards. Sam de Ruyter, she'll move up to 12 points. And Lauren Perry does enough to pick up 2 points to win the bunch sprint. So a little bit of a shuffle. Doesn't really affect Amber Pate or Chloe Moran too much. Sam de Ruyter just closing the gap a little bit, though, towards Alexandra Martin Wallace. So she now goes into equal 3rd place on 12 points. Amber Pate still out in front on 20, and Chloe Moran 2nd on 17 points.
But it is pretty tight at the top of the table there. Only 2-point lead for Pate over Moran, and of course Sophie Edwards has been chipping her way up toward that too. It's not inconceivable that we might get a 3-up podium for the South Australian team. They're riding very strongly, but also very independently. We haven't seen them chasing each other, but we also haven't seen any of them in particular sitting back and just dragging the other riders up.
Finally, a little bit of time for them to ease off. It's been quite frantic the last 20 laps or so, and that's another opportunity to go on the attack if it goes too slow. Amber Pate just wants to go, 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 and there she is again. She's already leading on 20 points. This will be interesting to see who has the legs. We know the South Australians will be happy to let her go out in front. Lauren Perry, is she going to be able to chase? What have the Queenslanders got left? Emily Watts is also out there on her own. So this is going to be tactically very, very good for the South Australians. Sam de Ruyter doing everything she can to try and get across, but she hasn't been able to close the gap to Amber Pate. 25 laps to go as they come around, and the leader of the race, after taking a lap on the field, hasn't scored another point in any of the sprints, hasn't needed to. She's looking to try and chase another 20.
Yeah, it's not speed in her legs that's getting her the advantage here. It's certainly the tenacity and the drive that keeps her going. She's a bit of a diesel engine out there. She looks really comfortable. She just gets into this great position on the bike. The head's dropping a bit because she is starting to get tired after the effort she's made. She does need to pick up some more points, though, because there is not a lot of differential between gold and silver. So even if Pate just picks these points up and gets absorbed back into the bunch, that puts her in a pretty plumb position.
23 laps to go now. Sam de Ruyter still trying to get across to Amber Pate. So the individual pursuit national champion chasing the bronze medalist. And at the moment, it's the 3rd place rider that's just holding that advantage. It hasn't really blown out or closed at all. They are both going at exactly the same speed as they come down with 22 laps to go. But the speed they're going at is faster than the peloton. Pate is now over half a lap in front. Sam de Ruyter only just over half a lap. Sam de Ruyter not quite half a lap ahead of the peloton. Both trying to get around for the next sprint, which is coming. 21 laps to go. There's the sound of the bell. The first sprint points that Amber Pate will get. She'll pick up the 5. De Ruyter's not going to be able to catch her for this one. I say that, and she probably will now, but Pate down the back straight. She'll get the 5 points here. DeRuyter will get the 3. Lauren Perry, as she has done so many times, trying to pick up the crumbs as Martin Wallace has come over the top of her. Pate for 5, DeRuyter for 3, and it's Martin Wallace from Queensland. She's sitting in 3rd place overall on 12 points. This will give her another couple, and she crosses the line 3rd place ahead of Lauren Perry.
Well, Amber Pate took the 5 points, but look at the body language. She is in a whole world of hurt. She keeps turning around, I think kind of hoping, praying that Sam DeRuyter might come and join her. A bit of height on the track there, maybe thinking she could have a breakaway buddy. I think that we will see this shut down now. They've run out of legs, but it was good for Pate to get the 5 points. Also worth noting, because we do have still a tight top of the table there, only a 7-point differential with Moran, is that Pate is not a sprinter. She will not get points from a bunch sprint here. This is the only way she does it. It's a hard way to do it. I don't know if she can keep this up coming into the final couple of sprints because Moran certainly has a bit more speed. So DeRuyter and Pate do have the opportunity to stay away. It is starting to pull out a little bit again now, but they're certainly starting to tire.
Tell you what's really interesting, we do have 2 riders now that have come out from the peloton, and it's Emily Watts and Chloe Moran. But Moran was still doing the policing role for Amber Pate. She swung up the track and just looked at Emily to say, well, I'm not going to help you bridge this gap. Now, Chloe Moran sits in 2nd place on 18 points, only 7 points behind Amber Pate. 2 sprints still to come, double points on the last. There's still 15 points up for grabs. Moran definitely the faster sprinter, perhaps the faster of all of these 4 riders as they've come together out in front now. So Chloe Moran still in a very good position to maybe go for the title herself.
Well, sitting in 1st and 2nd, I don't see a scenario where one of them sacrifices themselves for the other. They are both rightly in 1st and 2nd, and the threat for that silver medal, who would be on paper Martin Wallace, she's not in the break. So that's quite a factor that just doesn't need to be taken into consideration. So the South Australians, I hope we see them racing each other.
We can see the peloton now, what's left of it. There's up the track going slow, and here's our 4-rider breakaway. So now the 4 have come together. That's happened very quickly in these last couple of laps, and they can see the back of the peloton. The peloton's still high on the track, so here's another lap gain. Amber Pate for her 2nd lap. Lauren Perry jumps off the front of the peloton. It doesn't matter in terms of the lap being gained. So there's 20 points being added to the tally of those 4 riders, including the race leader Amber Pate, silver position as well, Chloe Moran, and who was previously 4th place, Sam DeRuyter. She'll move now up into the bronze medal spot.
It'll take Emily Watts up into that 4th spot now. The winner will come from that 4.
And it's the penultimate sprint. We see 3 South Australians out in front with Lauren Perry. And down the back straight, we can see 2nd position Chloe Moran with the white helmet. Look over the shoulder. She really wants to go. Sophie Edwards trying to come up around the outside of her. But Moran wants these points. She's in 2nd overall. She'll get them. There's 5 more points to Chloe Moran. That'll take her up to very, very close indeed. Only 2 points behind Amber Pate in the overall lead.
Well, this will be very difficult for Pate to hold on to this lead because it is far more difficult for her to actually get points in that kind of sprint environment. So I think Chloe Moran has shown us not only does she have the good sprint legs, she's also been able to take a lap. She's better at positioning. The South Australians, no doubt, are in a position of dominance. Sam DeRuyter and Emily Watts are sitting in 3rd and 4th at the moment. And with all of the South Australians looking so similar on the bike, you're thinking, which one is it? How are they going? But certainly Amber Pate has longer legs. That's one of the easiest ways to pick her out. There's only, look at that, a 2-point differential between Pate. So let's see if we can help everybody pick between them. If we look at the moment, Pate is the 4th South Australian rider with that black and white helmet and the red skin suit. She's got white shoes, white socks and the longest legs out of all of them, if that's a good way to describe her.
Chloe Moran with the white helmet, that's the easiest way to pick her out. She's in 2nd place, but only 2 points behind Amber Pate.
And
Moran,
she's got the black shoes and the black socks. So we can look at the white shoes and white socks versus black to differentiate between them.
So Moran leads them through now. Pace has come right off this is allowing them all to just freshen up a little bit with 6 laps to go to the final sprint. Double points on offer, 2 points between Amber Pate and Chloe Moran. Sam de Ruyter, she's 10 points behind the overall lead on 35. If she was to win the final sprint and Amber Pate not place, she could certainly move back up, but Chloe Moran, certainly you would think.
Now here's the move. Amber Pate, she couldn't hang around and wait, and she has not been able to go with this move. Isn't this an interesting one? Kat Chung, another South Australian. Sophie Edwards, the other one that we've seen. All 4 of them have been pretty impressive today, but Amber Pate remains the 4th amongst them in the line here. It is actually Chloe Moran who's a little bit better positioned. But what are these pair doing? This is an interesting tactic. I'm not sure about it. I'm honestly not sure.
So Chung's gone for the last sprint, but Chloe Moran very quick onto the wheel, and perhaps she's seen now that her teammate who sits in second place overall is with her, so she's going to try and get her around for this final sprint. Now she's swung up and out of the way, and Chloe Moran is out there all on her own. She may have been hoping just for a straight-up sprint match, but she's going to have to fight for this one. 2 laps to go, and Chloe Moran is chasing a gold medal. She's 2 points behind the overall leader, Amber Pate. If she wins this final sprint, she will win the gold medal along with it. Sam de Ruyter leads the peloton for Victoria, trying to close things down, but the gap has opened right up now. 1 lap to go, and this has been an interesting development to see Chloe Moran pop out in front, but with 1 lap to go, the gap, I think, is too big. Moran down the back straight, 10 points on offer. The peloton is not closing down, and she might move from second place. She will indeed go from second place up into the gold medal by winning the final sprint. The new points race champion of Australia for the elite women, that's Chloe Moran, moving from second up to first on the final sprint after interesting team tactics. But doesn't matter. She came away with a gold.
I think it was an accidental attack from Chung. She possibly went for the lead out, I think, but had a little bit more in the tank than possibly she did. But Moran, classy ride from her. We did say that she tactically was very good. She knew how to position herself and had a lot of speed. So she was able to go immediately with that lead out / attack, however we want to categorise that. Either way, it worked for her beautifully and delivered her to a very smooth victory overall. From the very beginning, from the first sprint, she took control of this race. She did it pretty tough in the middle. It's not the easiest way to win a points race for sure, being in a break of 3 for so long, but not actually taking that lap. But it did all pay off for her in the end. And overall, Scott, a really dominant performance from the South Australian team.
Lauren Perry it was that led them home for the 6 points in second place. I think it was Sophie Edwards that may have popped across the line in third. So with Chloe Moran picking up the final 10-point double-point sprint, it really didn't matter what happened behind, chasing the silver medal between Amber Pate and Sam de Ruyter. The points difference was too big to overcome without that 10 points for Sam de Ruyter to try and chase to pick up a bit of a move in the overall standing. So there's Sam just congratulating Chloe Moran. Amber Pate, great ride by her as well. That was very strong. 2 laps taken. Not many points in the sprints, but she didn't need them, and it's a silver medal for her. So she led for the second half of the race pretty much. Amber Pate will come away with the silver behind her teammate Chloe Moran, and Sam de Ruyter will come away with the bronze medal. So backing up her individual pursuit gold from yesterday with a bronze medal now in the points race for the Victorian.
And she has her face suitably screwed up in quite the amount of discomfort you would expect after that kind of a points race. All of them had to work pretty hard for that. That was not a sit-in, sprint, swing up the track, take the pressure off the legs kind of race. All in their own way. They put a lot of effort in. There a lot of big thumbs up going on. I think probably absent the breath to say too many words, a thumbs up goes an awfully long way. But the South Australians, they rode fantastically together, and they really deserve this victory.
With the 3 medalists lined up there on the track, they could ride straight down onto the podium and get straight into the presentations. That will be the next thing we do, is the presentations for the last couple of races that we have seen. And that was the last race of the 3rd night of competition here in Brisbane at the Meares Velodrome. 2 big days of competition still to come. Looking forward to seeing the elite women's Keirin. We've got the men's Keirin as well, and the men's sprint still to come over the next couple of days. And we've seen some great junior racing as well. The under-19s have really stepped up. And Alessia McCaig winning the under-19 sprint today to back up the 500-metre time trial and the Kieran that she won as well in the previous couple of days. So Alessia McCaig is a young lady in a hurry with 3 gold medals from the competition, winning all of the sprint individual disciplines thus far. So
have you been waiting all day to say that? To say that Alessia McCaig's in a hurry?
No, I didn't. Did I mention how much he weighed at Perth?
You did, 3.77 kilos.
Yeah.
I
Not
took
tonight,
note of
though,
that.
Yeah, yesterday, wasn't it? So just to recap, this is the under-19 men. There was some controversy in this one. You see the man in the maroon colours on the yellow bike. Mitchell Yard, he put himself up into the silver medal by winning the final sprint, but was relegated for infringing on Jackson Hibar before that sprint. So he'd be disappointed. He came away with the bronze medal. Silver medal did go, and that's where it was there. That's where Jackson went down, just having his front wheel taken out. And you can see the wheel banging around all over the place. His forks were snapped.
Oh, and he looks cranky too. Fair enough, I might add.
He was thinking about how much Mum and Dad paid for that bike and what the replacement parts will
Yeah,
cost.
I'm pretty sure that's not what he was thinking, but he will be later.
There's a few chores to be done. He'll be mowing the lawn for the next 3 years.
A lot of dishwashing.
Absolutely. Now, he won the last sprints, but it was Cameron Rogers from the ACT that came away as the big champion in the under-19 points race, as his other family members have done several times in the past. The team sprints were good as well. It's always good to see the big, powerful men now, and that's why I'm looking forward to the sprints and the Kierans as well. A little bit more sanitised in the team sprint, but so fast. And Jensen Plowright also fast. Not quite as fast as those elite sprinters, but I tell you what, as far as the endurance riders are concerned, he's so powerfully built. This is Patrick Eddy pushing Liam Walsh, the silver medalist, as deep as he can be. So Walsh came away with the silver medal in the elite men's points race. But for the team sprint, it's Western Australia that came away with the bronze medal. That was a bit of a comeback win for them as well, because they were the 4th fastest after the qualifying, but were able to power themselves very well to come away and get the bronze medal over the top of the ACT. So the riders from Western Australia, Kai Bonza, Matthew Richardson and Luke Zachariah. Silver went to South Australia, Matthew Glaitzer, the tall man on the left-hand side. So great performance from him. He was riding in the star position with Lee Hoffman and Carlos Carismo. Carismo is the shorter of the 3 South Australians. But the national champions for 2021 for AusCycling here in the elite men's team sprint were New South Wales, and this was a fantastic final. They were so far behind South Australia coming to the final lap. And that's no disrespect to the New South Wales riders that did the first 2 laps. It was just that Matthew Glaitzer is so fast for South Australia that he dragged them out in front, and then Tom Cornish had to do something very special to bring it home and come away with the gold medal. It was very close indeed, but Charles Hoffman, Tom Cornish and John Travas did enough to win gold.
Well, they delivered Cornish perfectly, didn't they? He did his job, and they came away not only with the gold medal, but the fastest time through all of the rounds this evening. They look adequately pleased with themselves. Scott, I think it was a great effort all around.
Powerful men. And I know so Richardson, also Matthew Glaitzer, Nathan Hart, those riders that are in the Tokyo team for the Olympic Games have been doing some very, very heavy training. They've been doing gym, big, heavy personal bests in the gym. Throughout this week as well in the morning, and then coming out and racing in the evening. So even though they're under heavy workload, they're still riding super, super fast. That gym program will start to taper off over the next couple of months. But at the moment, it's this last opportunity they have to do a big block of power training, and they just cannot avoid doing that during the championships. They must keep that going to make sure that they hit their absolute maximum by Tokyo.
No, they're doing a tremendous job, I think, to perform at such a high level, and the really good times as well. So it's one thing when they're match racing against each other to say, wow, they're doing a great job, but when they are posting pretty fast times, that's when you can quite objectively say, okay, they're going fast, and absent any heavy gym loads, we can expect them to really zip around those boards in Tokyo.
Cornish on the right, blisteringly fast on the final lap. Carismo from South Australia just trying to hold on. They were in the gold medal position. set up by the fast man Matthew Glaetzer. But they just could not hold off Tom Cornish for New South Wales. The elite women's points race, that was the last race we saw, the last race, and an unfortunate tumble there early on. Not too many crashes. We've been pretty fortunate throughout the championship so far with only a couple of small tumbles. Sophie Sutton was taken to hospital this morning, one of the under-19 riders racing in the under-19 Omnium. Haven't heard, I think she's okay, but it was just for precautionary checks. And there was the points race winner, Chloe Moran. Hard-fought race that was, for sure. And some interesting moments throughout, and we really did see how team tactics from the States really do play a big role. And riders like Lauren Perry, Emily Watts were caught out a little bit by not having some colleagues out there to help.
It is very tough going one out, and they knew that from the start as well. I mean, we can remark on it and say intellectually that it will be a difficult race for them, but we saw that play out pretty quickly. Actually, it was a very strange points race, Scott, to have that break go early but not actually get the lap, but still play a huge role in these overall outcomes. So would they do it differently? Well, it doesn't really matter. Sam de Ruyter gets that bronze medal. Amber Pate, our power breakaway rider, taking the silver there. And, of course, Chloe Moran takes the gold, the green and gold. Well deserved, Scott.
Louise Jones doing the presentation. She's our Chief Commissaire, the Welsh national representative, Commonwealth Games, and Great Britain rider from the past, Com Games champion, living up here in Brisbane. So great performances by all three riders. It really was a cracking race between these three. Emily Watts came away with the bronze medal, being the fourth of that quartet to take a lap late in the race. And Sophie Edwards from South Australia, she was in fifth place. But Chloe Moran on 53 points, Amber Pate on 45, and Sam de Ruyter on 35. All smiles. Love getting those Australian Championship jerseys. And Chloe Moran really did put in a spectacular performance. She was in the points early. Then her teammate Amber Pate took over by taking a lap and going into first place. There was that moment of, well, we will help each other out here. But in the end, it was the sprint power of Chloe Moran that put herself right back up in contention to take gold. And then winning that final sprint, that was the nail in the coffin, coming away to win the overall title. So great performance from her. Well, Kate, it's been a fantastic day of competition and a lot of bunch races tonight with the Omniums and the points races and so, but you know, that's our bread and butter. That's what we enjoy watching. The tactics involved within that is always so good to watch.
It is. I mean, I think we've seen quite a lot of different styles tonight across the bunch races. And, you know, this is the riders learning their craft, and certainly in slightly different conditions. Some riders have strong teams supporting them and others have been more one out. But all of our winners have been very deserved.
Certainly have been very deserved, and there's plenty more gold medals on offer over the next couple of days. 2 more days of competition to come. Really looking forward to the big, powerful sprinters. The Kirans and the sprints are still to come over the next couple of days, so make sure you tune in, and we'll talk to you then.
Come and discover the epic wonders, the friendly faces, and incredible new adventures that will change you and the way you see the world. Right here in Queensland.